Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our special council meeting tonight to specifically deal with budget. I will call this meeting to order, and the first item on the agenda is confirmation of the agenda. Do we have a mover and seconder to confirm the agenda? Councillor Murray, Councillor Marshall, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Does anybody have a conflict of interest with anything on the agenda? Don't see anything. If you find that you're getting into
I think we have lost everybody at Town Hall.
I believe so.
I was panicking. I thought it was me this time.
And ask everyone just to hold the meeting until we're sure that we're live again, streaming and taping. So Levitsa will track that for us.
We never went anywhere.
Yeah, it's every now and then even though we're on a fiber connection now, we do have this problem every now and then where we drop the connection.
Okay, we are recording.
We are recording.
Okay, we got as far as calling for a chair for the budget, and then we froze. I'm not sure what that's an indication of, but anyways, and I don't have my screen on full view. When it, you can help me? Okay, great.
You're gonna call for a mover in a second?
Yeah, we can. If you want to just speak up, I've only got.
I'll nominate Dougite.
Okay, moved by Sherry. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Okay, any other nominations at this time for a budget chair? Last call, any other nominations for budget chair? So do we,
Well, Mike Tam has his hand up.
Mike Tam has his hand up. Okay, go ahead, Mike.
I'll nominate Nicholas Vink.
Okay. Any further nominations? Okay, so I will go in reverse order. Nicholas, are you wanting to be budget chair? Oh, he's muted.
Yes, thank you, Walter. I would be happy to do it, but I would defer to the deputy mayor if he would like to do it this year.
Okay. Doug, do you want that job?
I'll do it.
Doug says he's going to do it.
Thanks, Nicholas.
So it was moved by Sherry. Do we need a seconder here now to make that thing, make that nomination all legal like? So it's moved by Councillor Rose, or moved by Sherry, second by Councillor Rose. Sorry. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Then Doug is our budget chair. So at this time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Doug and whoever, Terry and whoever else.
There has to be anything on the second page of that piece of paper that was up here. So
Not really.
No.
No.
Okay.
Oh, a motion that we accept the agenda. It's just the one thing. Do we need a motion to accept the agenda? Yeah, we did. We did. Yeah.
So we're gonna
Okay, there we go.
indulge right into it apparently. The treasurers, the first one we have up here then is Terry for the consolidated budget notes.
Can you see my screen? Yeah.
Yes, I
Yeah.
need to.
Just drag it over. Oh, are you sharing or am
Okay, everyone, can you hear me?
Good.
You can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we're just sorting out here also. This is the first time for me to do this by Zoom, so bear with me, please. Good evening, council, staff, ladies and gentlemen of the public. We are here to present and discuss the draft 2021 budget. Staff are presenting council with department detailed budgets that provide revenue and expenditures required to meet or exceed operating levels of service, and are requesting capital funding to add new assets or to replace or complete major repairs on West Perth's current tangible capital assets. I want to thank council for your patience as we work to get this budget ready for you. I also want to thank the CAO and senior leadership team for working with me to help me understand their departments as we built their budgets. And an apology to Darcy for giving him a bit of heart failure with his budget not being in the binder. I thank the clerk's department staff for helping get the binders ready and helping with this meeting, and the treasury staff for all their hard work and day-to-day support. Each councillor and manager have received a budget binder with detailed draft budgets for each of the departments, and the digital version included with the agenda. The first section is information on West Perth, such as the community profile, strategic plan, and department structures, listing services and key initiatives for 2021. Also included are supporting documents, and I'm going to take over here just for a sec So just to speak to, you have this document, the continuity of reserves schedule showing the estimated year-end balance of each reserve as of December 31st, 2020, and proposed transfers to and from reserves for 2021. And the proposed transfers are included in each relevant department's detailed budget submission. You will also see, I'll get into that, current long-term debt schedule showing the annual principal and interest payments and the year-end outstanding long-term principal debt balances for the current debt that we have, along with the proposed long-term debt estimated future principal and interest payments for the fire hall construction and the Henry Street Bridge. And the principal and interest are in the relevant budgets. Then we have the capital projects listing of proposed projects, some of which have been pre-approved by council. Each project has proposed capital financing options for council consideration. And the last pages in your binder, thank you, Mike, are key maps, West Perth wards, so the town of Mitchell. So this is one map anyway, and then Logan, Hibbert, and Fullerton wards, highlighting the capital project locations proposed for 2021. Deputy Mayor Ite, if there are no questions on the format of the binder, I can proceed to review the budget information under the Consolidated Budget Notes tab and the Assessment Report under the Assessment Information tab. Following that, each manager would present the highlights of their budget. And I'm just asking if CEO Jeff, do you have anything more to add, please?
Sure. Thank you, Terry. I know that there'll be more opportunities for this, but I certainly want to speak on behalf of staff and say thank you for the work you've done to learn about our organization and put this budget together. And certainly you thank the managers for their work. I would just mention that Terry will provide a brief overview of the budget. The councillors have had the budget over since last Thursday or Friday. So when managers go through their various department budgets, we'll highlight some of the major changes that, but we certainly will take questions and discussion. And you know, for example, in the case of the fire hall budget or the fire department budget, Chief Hunter will have a bit of a report, which will be a decision, and we perhaps want to leave that decision till we get to the end of the meeting about deciding whether or not to vote on that resolution, or perhaps you want to spend the money early, and those that go first get the first dibs. So we'll see how that goes and what council's wishes are. One quick thing I just would mention is that we'll do our best to answer questions. Some of the questions, certainly the technical questions, will be answered by managers, and we appreciate the questions that have come in over the weekend and and today we've done our best to answer them as we go. Some of the questions about the way we report funds and the way we've got some deferred funds and different revenues are a part of the realignment of the way we're reporting, and we'll have to rely on Terry to help answer those questions. So you might see us sometimes looking at one another about who the most appropriate person to answer is. And of course, since we're not all in the same room, there'll be a little inefficiency there, but we'll do our best. And then finally, if there's any questions that we need to get an answer for and bring back to a future meeting, we will do our best to get those answers and bring them to a future meeting. We're hopeful that we have the budget to the point that council will feel comfortable with it coming back to the April 6th meeting for approval, as there are a number of projects that we'd like to get going on, and we'd like to get budget approval to support that. And we would answer questions and seek council's approval of the budget that evening. And of course, if there are questions that linger or if there's discomfort with approving that night, we'll contemplate with the council's with consultation with council whether they'd like to add an extra meeting or defer until April the 19th, which again I would say is not ideal, but we want to get it right. So with those opening comments, I would, and assuming there aren't any questions, I would turn it back to the chair of the budget committee, Deputy Mayor Ike, to then turn it over to Terry for an overview presentation.
And I can only see 3 people, so if anybody has a question for Terry, right? Otherwise, we're just going to let her start the assessment portion. Okay, Terry, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the very first page you're seeing is the Municipality of West Perth draft budget summary. So it's kind of an overview point form of where we're at and what we are presenting. So the West Perth 2021 budget represents cash requirements in the amount of $8,847,338. That is what is being presented. So this is a 2.56% increase in cash requirements from your 2020 budget. The 2021 assessment consists of growth in the municipality. And as you all know, Municipal Property Assessment Corporation postponed the 2020 assessment update, but the total assessment growth, which is brand new assessment in the municipality, like brand new homes or farm sheds or so on, is 0.76%. So the County of Perth sets the tax ratios as the upper tier municipality. This year, they changed their tax policy on the multi-residential ratio, and they changed it from 1.5 to 1 for 2021. So that means the multi-residential class will have the same tax rate as the residential class starting in 2021. West Perth's share of the County of Perth levy requirement is 23.78%. And this is calculated based on West Perth's total assessment as a percentage of the County of Perth's total assessment. The education rates are set by the province each year, and the 2021 residential rate is unchanged at 0.153% from 2020. And those rates are set under Ontario Regulation 498 as amended, and it is amended every year for the rates. We are still waiting for the final on the draft business education rates. For West Perth purposes only, so we can move down to the tax rates here. For simplification, a property, a residential property with $100,000 of current value assessment, their property taxes for West Perth purposes only will be $575.28 a year. So using this draft budget presentation, that is an impact of $8.51 from last year, or 1.50%. That's the increase from 2020. So going down further, you can see West Perth's 2020 rate and the 2021 rate, and the difference. The county have passed their rates, so there is an increase there. And then the school boards have kept the same rate. So the overall impact on a $100,000 assessment for all purposes, West Perth County and the school board, is $15.70 increase and a 1.61% overall increase in their taxes. And as you can see along the bottom, the percentage of the tax rate, so that would be the final tax rate that would show up on the tax bills times the assessment for the resident, is $992.84 per 100,000. West Perth's share of that is 57.94%. The counties is 26.65%, and the school boards are 15.41%. The school board rate has gone down in the last 7 or 8 years consistently. This is, I know this year it didn't change, but it has gone down quite a bit. Okay. So the next page is the draft consolidated budget for 2021. And I sent out an amendment to that. And I would like to, I'm going to ask to share my screen because I wanted to, what I want to do is take the 2021 budget and realign it to match because I hadn't done that in the original one. So I'm going to ask to share the screen. And I need to just take a second to do this, excuse me. So do you see the Municipality of West Perth draft consolidated budget 2021?
Yes, we do.
Okay, perfect. So in order to do apples to apples again, from not just the 2020 current and 2020 budget, which I did before, I wanted to do that for the 2021 budget for general taxation also. So I hope you can see I'm moving around my cursor a little bit here. So I've taken the general levy, the draft levy, and put it up parallel to the budget from last year and the actual, so that it's in the calculation. The only other numbers that changed are, so the levy requirements, that's now included in the levy requirements, and I've taken out the capital financing that is included in all of the operating departments above. So from your capital schedule in the back, you'll see that the total capital actually for the general tax projects is $7,445,590. But with financing of grants, transfers from reserves, and so on, that financing is $2,538,379. So subtract that off. So you're coming up with the net capital, which matches the net capital draft budget or draft budget from 2020 and the net capital actual costs of $5 million. So then you're kind of comparing apples to apples. So our budget this year capital is 4.9 million. Last year it was 6.5 million. So just above that in your levy requirements. So we added in the taxation, took out the capital financing included in there that belongs in capital. So this is showing us that we are budgeting for a operating surplus of $989,640 as compared to last year when you budgeted for a 2.2 million surplus. And currently, then these numbers for 2020 are still a moving target. So they're not written in stone yet, but for now, it's sitting at that. But overall, I'm going to move that a little bit. The 2020 general taxation budget, we had a surplus in the operating, so we had to, and then the capital ended up being 5 million. So overall, it's a deficit because we did not get that financing, that long-term debt that we budgeted for. So that's why that's like that. And we are rebudgeting for majority of that again this year. And so those are the changes on this one. And I will send this out after the meeting. If council make a decision on what the levy is going to be, the levy requirements, I can actually put those numbers in and send this to you so you can get a good picture of what's actually happening. Okay, apples to apples. Just below that, you have the water and sanitary department, and it's a user pay system. So it lands up being zero. So we levy, or we have our projects, our operating expenditures and our capital expenditures, and we finance that with the rates. So, and any surplus or deficit, it gets closed to their respective reserves. So that's why it shows as a zero, because there's no impact on any kind of taxation. So I'm not sure if there's any questions on this at this point, or if you'd like me to just continue.
I can't see anybody.
Okay.
So if you had a question, can you speak?
I know it's a lot to take in right now, but once you're maybe have it in front of you, it's just more comparing apples to apples. So.
Okay, I'm hearing nobody, so you're gonna.
Okay.
Are you?
I'm going to continue if that's okay.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Back to Kristen. The next, no, I still need to go a little bit more. Okay, and down a little bit. The next one, thank you. Awesome, here we are. Okay, so this is the spreadsheet we use to calculate West Perth tax rate, only West Perth. So we take the new returned roll assessment, and then we multiply that by the ratios as supplied by the county, and it comes up with weighted assessment. So from that weighted assessment, we take our dollars to be raised, the 8,847,338, divided into the weighted assessment total, 1,537,000, and yeah, that's a big number, or 1 million. 1 billion, yeah, wow. And then it calculates the residential tax rate. So the residential tax rate is $575.28 per 100,000. So you'll see that up on your screen right there, decimal 0.0575284. Then we take that residential tax rate and multiply it by the returned roll CVA rate. So we multiply it by the 877,000. God, I can't even say my numbers right. Anyway, and we come up with the levy, or the amount that we are raising for the residential, and that is $5,045,366 is going to be raised from the residential taxpayers for West Perth. And that is a rate of 1.5% increase over last year. And that last column is just last year's rates, just for a reference. So that's, and then those ratios will calculate all the way down. So you can actually see on this spreadsheet how much we're raising from the farmland, from managed forest, right down to your large industrial, your new construction, and so on. It's by class. Okay, good, thanks. I'm not.
Sorry, excuse me, Terry. Doug, I've got just a quick question. This maybe isn't for Terry, but
Sorry.
I'm just curious on the county changing the multi-residential from 1.5 to 1. Well, just what was the thinking on that?
Brick will answer that.
Sure, Councillor Marshall. The purpose of that is to create an incentive to encourage more multi, and the reason that we want that incentive, or the way it is now, is it's kind of a disincentive to having multis. We want to bring it back to a level playing field in order to encourage more affordable housing choices and not discourage them through taxation.
Great, just wanted to confirm that that was the issue, not something else. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Anything else for Terry, or Terry, you want to move on?
I sure can. Yeah. Sorry, get my numbers right here. That's nervous. That's all. Okay.
Hold on, Terry. Mayor McKenzie has a question.
Pardon me?
Mayor McKenzie has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's fine. And I guess I'm just cognizant of that we have the information in front of us, but there may be some people that are watching this that don't.
Okay.
If you would run across, the same as you did for residential, just run across the farm rate.
Okay, I sure will. So the farmland rate is, and it's 0.25% because that's the ratio of the residential rate. So the farm tax rate is 0.00143821. So the total taxes being levied on the FT or farmland assessed properties, $2,900,807. And it's also a 1.5% increase also. Does that answer?
I guess what I was trying to point out here, Terry, is that the farmland is 2,900,000, whereas the residential is 5 million.
Right. Okay.
Oh, fine.
And I think you'll see that even on the next graph. And I know some the people can't see it, of course, but so this graph is taken from the information from the previous slide from the schedule. So the residential, it's a pie chart. So the residential includes the multi-residential in here, in this number of $5,094,418. The farmland includes the managed forest. Both the managed forest and farmland rates are 25% of the residential rate, and it's $2,904,317. We have industrial, and that'll be all of the industrial classes, and it's going to raise $255,697. So that's 3%. Residential, I should have said, is 58%, and farmland is 33%. We have pipeline, and it's a minimal $34,568. All of our commercial tax classes, 6% for $550,447. And then we have our landfill, and it's $7,893. Any questions? Great. So these next pie charts also, so the small one in the top right-hand corner, the distribution of the 2021 residential taxes only. So you did see that on the first summary sheet where I mentioned that West Perth, so for the dollar, West Perth is 57.94 cents on the dollar for the tax rate. The county is 26.65%. And the school boards are 15.41%. And the bigger pie chart is the distribution of the 2021 taxes. And you will see this when in the bylaw, as will all the residents, because the bylaw that I'm proposing to have a Schedule A to the bylaw will show the county, the education, and West Perth rates, all the classes, all the rates, all the amounts owing by rates and so on, with a grand total. Right now it's $15,958,360 for all purposes. So with $808,847,338 for West Perth, $4,068,699 for the county, and $3,042,321 for the school boards. So let me see. Yeah, these come from, these have been on the summary sheet, and these come from the worksheet from before, and you will again see these totals on Schedule A. So this is just some sample tax billing impacts by class. So I've given you the amounts. You have the residential rates. You can multiply that by however many hundred you want or whatever, and get that total. But I asked Lori, our tax administrator, to give me some actual West Perth taxes within these classes. So these are actual properties that are on your assessment roll. And these are the actual impacts that are going to happen. So the commercial and industrial are lower because you've got the new one. This is the old one. Sorry, this is the old one I'm looking at. So it'll be commercial industrial for 2021 is 0.0088. So they have actually credits. They will actually have credits on their bills because they reduced the rates for the business education. Now these again are not final. And I went on the Opta site and it still says that the rates are not final. I don't anticipate any changes, but yeah, I don't want to say that they're the exact 100% just yet. So they're really, the industrial and the commercial do have credits, and the multi-residential also has a credit, and that it's grabbing the residential rate there because it now is the residential rate, but comparing last year, they're going to have a bigger credit, and that's because their ratio went from 1.25 to 1. So these are just some good samples. If people would like to know what their taxes are going to be if we are using this tax rate at the end of the meeting. Any questions? Okay. So if it's okay now, I can move on to the assessment report.
Tam has a question.
Oh, sorry.
Question, Terry, just about these big structures that are going up on the farms. If somebody builds a $5 or $10 million barn, where do we see the impact? Where do we see that number? How that changes things?
You would see that in the growth. So now let me see. Let me just get last year, and I was going to kind of touch that, but I can do it right now with the assessment. So what I did was to find out what the notional rate would be and so on. We downloaded or we used the 2021 tax roll, and then it also shows even in Opta what the growth is and the growth by tax class. So residential growth, and I can give you some numbers here. The overall growth in the municipality was $18,248,900. So the residential growth only, that's all brand new assessment, $13,166,952. The farm, $7,006,700. Now that would depend on when the building permits were done, occupancy permits and so on, and that it got to MPAC to be put on the roll. Does that help?
Yeah, so that the farm growth is in the farmland number in the 2.9 then?
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I know for all that goes on, it doesn't seem like that big of a number really for some of the size of these projects, but that was just my question.
Yes, and again, it just, I guess, depends on when occupancy happens and it gets on the roll with MPAC. And when we receive the supplemental taxes here and so on. So
Okay.
there's a few things in play there. Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, so I've got a recommendation here at the end, so I guess it just that the report be received just for council purposes, but I can go through the report now if you like, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, you need more.
Okay.
Yeah, you can continue on.
Okay, perfect. So what I've given you here is just a breakdown of the changes over the last few years in your assessment growth and so on. All this information has been taken out of Opta, which is the online property tax analysis data, or Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. And it was included, of course, on our return roll that we receive every December. And so the Municipal Property Corporation website states that due to COVID-19 pandemic, the Ontario government has postponed the 2020 assessment update. They have indicated that property assessments for 2021 property tax year will continue to be based on the fully phased in January 1st, 2016 current values. This means your property assessment for the 2021 property tax year will be the same as the 2020 tax year, unless there have been changes to your property. And that's where the growth comes in. So the first table, and this is all from Opta too. I'm not sure if you have any questions or what you'd like me to go through. I know there was a question about farmland. So since 2016, it went up 90.84% in assessment. Residential went up 12.86. Overall, your grand total of growth for 2020, you can see it right there, $18,248,900. And then your 2017 to 21 equity changes overall, even including exempt, was 53.93%. So there's better breakdowns as you go through onto your next graph. So the next graph shows your 2017, 18, 19, and 20 assessment patterns of growth only for the broad tax classes. And what we mean by broad tax classes is the other class will include multi-res, industrial, large industrial landfills. They kind of lump those together, okay? So you can see where and then below that is a little schedule showing what those rates are, what those graph bars mean. So in 2020, for example, residential went up 1.52%, commercial 3.59, and so on. You can see that in your graphs. Any questions on that? Kind of shows you where the shifts are too. The next table gives the assessment patterns from base year 2016 to final phase in year 2020, but it doesn't include any of the exempt properties. You got a lot of exempt properties in 2021. It was like 45 million. So, and then below the graph is the schedule giving you dollar values so that you can, and it matches your assessment, your returned roll every year. And so these are the breakdowns of the returned roll, the total assessment. The next couple of little graphs compare your 2016 base year to 2021 assessment distribution. So a lot's happened over the last few years. So you can see that farmland in 2016 increased by 13%. And the residential decreased by 11%. Commercial decreased by 1%, and the other classes decreased by 1%. Okay. So now I can, if we want to talk about a notional tax rate. So it refers to the tax rate estimates used by municipalities to identify in-year assessment growth. So municipal tax rates reflect the relationship between budget expenditures, which is our levy requirements, and the total assessment that is returned on the assessment roll for the current year. So based on that relationship between the year-end assessment totals and taxes on the returned assessment roll, the notional tax rates are calculated. So notional tax rates raise the same amount of taxes as that collected for the previous base year on the returned assessment roll. So to quantify the growth component, the notional tax rate is applied to the revised assessment totals for the next year. So we're taking last year's amounts that we wanted to raise and applying it to the assessment roll. So it's actually landed up being a reduction in the tax rate. Our notional rate went down. So let me see if we can carry on here. So West Perth's notional tax rate is calculated by using the previous year's levy requirements with the new growth weighted assessment. And in the previous years, when there was phased in weighted assessment, it would also be added to the growth weighted assessment to calculate the notional rate. We would have to include that phased in portion. So the weighted assessment is calculated on the CVA return roll for each tax class times the ratio by tax class as approved by the Upper Tier County. For example, the farmland tax rate is 25% of the residential tax rate, and the commercial tax rate is 1.2469% of the residential tax rate. So the 2021 notional rate is $560, and it actually, when I had $560.15, that was before the final multi-res change from 1.25 to 1. So that actually changed a few of these numbers. So I'll tell you what they are. So the notional tax rate would be $560.92 versus the $560.15 per 100,000 of assessment, which is, and it was 1.17 decrease, but it's 1.03. So it made a difference. So that's the decrease in the 2020 rate of $566.77. So the notional rate is considered a revenue neutral rate. So the assessment changes that occurred during the previous year revised the total assessment on which the tax rates for the year are based. Of course, you have growth in assessment, so you've got a bigger base to levy your requirements on. So that means at year end, using the prior year's tax rates, additional taxes representing growth are generated. So now what we're doing is we're taking, to come up with another way of looking at it, we're taking our last year's tax rates, so the 506 over all this new assessment. So if we were to just come in with this same tax rate as last year, we would raise additional dollars only on the growth. So, and again, these numbers changed just a tad because of the multi-res change. So the Municipality of West Perth's assessment base has grown from new assessment in 2020 in the amount of 22,572,900. In 2020, it was 15,927,000. So that's your 0.76% increase. So, and these totals don't include your exempt class. So using West Perth's tax rates with the assessment growth of 0.76%, there was an additional, now was with the 1.25, $102,030 in taxation. Now with this other, it's $103,080, an increase of $1,050. So if you were to keep the tax rate the exact same, you would generate those dollars. Okay. Any questions on that?
Hearing none.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. I think I'm done. I think we can turn it over to the department managers, if that's okay with you, Mary, Deputy Mary.
Oh no, don't tell me that. Walter got mad. You could see it in his eyes.
Okay.
So the first up is the Council General Administration, and Carla Preston is going to do it the first. There she is.
Yes, I'm here. Yep. I think I'll make it a lot easier. There is nothing really notable on this current budget in terms of increases. It's just more annualization increases. That's all I have to add. If there's any questions.
Does anybody have any questions? There's a 1.05% increase. And you have to speak up. I can only see, with the split screen, I can only see 3 people and Carl. Hearing no one. Jeff, are you doing general administration?
Yes, I'll do general administration, and I may need assistance from Terry or Carla, but I'll start. The highlights that I would point out in general administration are we received a reduction in Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund grant of $175,700. That was the scheduled reduction. And for those of you that have gone through years of $600,000 reductions in a single year, this is a low amount because frankly, there's very little more to lose in that. So that's why it's reducing in the amount. The next highlight I would give you is in, and it's a highlight that will be a theme throughout our conversations tonight about, we did receive a number of grants in 2020 that had an impact on our budget to actuals. And they brought in revenues that were unanticipated, in some cases because they were COVID-related support grants, and in some cases they were grants, other things such as connecting links that Mike Kramer in his area will speak about, that allowed us to get a lot more work done and create good value for West Perth. I want to highlight that under salaries, full-time and part-time, there was a bit of a reduction in 2020 actual due to some vacancies. I was going to call it vacancy management, but it's just essentially the inability to immediately replace, and that time between replacing staff that have left creates a savings in terms of salaries at the expense of that work being done by others, but it results in a savings to the budget. The other thing I want to highlight in salaries full-time is that for the 2021 budget, the budget numbers that have been put before you include the increase that is the final implementation of our market check work that council approved in March of 2020. We implemented it in June of 2021. 20, and because it was implemented at the end of June, half of the impact went on to 2020, and the other half comes in 2021. And finally, in salaries and benefits full-time, I would mention that we have added a human resources generalist position to the staff salary or to the staff complement in the budget process. This position, the addition of this position to the complement of West Perth staffing has been reviewed with the executive committee, but executive committee minutes won't be reported back to council until the April 6th or 7th meeting, April 6th meeting. So I would just highlight that that position, we anticipate it covering human resources, generalist assistance, payroll, which will free up some capacity in finance, and a little bit of health and safety, benefits administration, and those kinds of related activities. And the budget amount that's in there for the 2021 budget is 6 months. So in other words, by the time we get it formally approved by council and get it recruited and in place, it would be the middle of the year. And so only the second half of the year would be in the 2021 budget. And then there would be an impact on 2021 about bringing that position on as a full year as opposed to only 6 months. And it being a full-time, recommended to be a full-time position, that extra impact would be next year. And the 2021 impact of that was modeled at approximately $42,000 or $44,000. One other thing I want to point out at the bottom in the legal fees, there's a bit of an outlier in the 2020 legal fees related to a significant uptake in legal fees related to some rather unique legal work we had done to allow us to support writs and their request for a guarantor, which we ultimately approved. And we did more legal work on that in 2021. And that money, some of that will be able to be recovered in interest fees that we will be charging. And the final thing I want to highlight, and I'm going to move to the next page in your binder, I want to mention that under miscellaneous, we're showing a one-time special project of $8,619, which is the number that aligns with the request from the Broadhaven Chamber of Commerce for assistance from the municipality for lost revenue in 2020 related to COVID. It is outlined in a January 15th, 2021 letter from the Broadhaven Chamber. It was taken to council on January 18th, 2021, and council asked that it be referred to the budget. We have included in the budget that is before you, and staff are recommending that council approve that. And if you follow the revenue or you follow the money that supports that expense, we would take that. We're proposing to take that from the state Safe Start, one of the Safe Start grants that we received from the province, which is precisely what those grants were provided to municipalities to do to support their communities and support their own operations. I have no further highlights, but with the assistance of staff, I'll try to answer questions if there are any.
Does anyone have a question for Jeff and or Carla? I don't know if I asked it, Carla. And again, you'll have to just speak up if you have one.
Deputy Mayor Ait, if I may.
Councillor Mink?
Could you guide us through the lines on the budget, Jeff, or whomever, for the Safe Restart funding, how much we spent of it already? And so I can see it as the revenue and put into 2021, but I thought that was revenue in 2020 that we received and would have been spent or not spent and carried forward for COVID relief funding in the revenue section. So where does it all appear in the revenue section? And then where does it show up in the expenses section that we would put some of that to use?
So Councillor Vink, I'm going to start, and I'll ask Terry to just explain some of how we're showing it as deferred revenue. But Terry, I want to first of all say that the funds that were provided by Safe Start came in phases, and the phases related to 2020 expenditures, but anything that wasn't expended in 2020 could be carried forward to 2021, but we have to incur bona fide COVID-related expenses, such as materials or supplies, safety equipment, things like that, or sound equipment, or suffer a loss in revenue. And that's where we are illustrating an impact that we can then apply that grant to. So that frames up the purpose of the grant, and then I'd like Terry to actually explain how we're showing it in revenue expenditures.
Sure. The money was received and then it was put into a deferred revenue account. So we have yet to compile, we've got a lot of information already, but yet to compile all of the expenses and lost revenues that occurred in 2020 due to COVID. And once we do, we will pull some of that revenue out of there into the 2020 actual revenue. And some of it will stay sitting in the deferred revenue, depending on how much it is. So we will recognize that revenue for the expenses that we incurred in 2020. Does that help you?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, it'll make maybe more sense once we can get the list to you. And I believe one of the counselors had that in a question, and I sent it out or I just maybe mentioned it in one of my emails back to everyone, that we did put into deferred revenue and that we will be recognizing the revenue once we compile the list for council. And we also have to report to the province.
So if I can again follow up to that one. So what you're saying is, if once we get that stuff figured out, then we'll carry that surplus forward to 2021. So essentially we can count on the whole amount in 2021 because we have budgeted the 2020 numbers already, and you'll just fill in that those expenses and then carry forward the surplus into 2021.
No, we haven't closed 2020 yet. 2020 is still open and getting a lot of activity with transactions.
Yeah, but so when I compare the budget column or the actual column or the almost actual column,
right,
that number is the expenses will be offset by whatever you carry forward into. So if we have $100,000 in Safe Start funding right now in the budget for 2021, but we actually apply it into 2020. Well, now we're going to have a surplus of money there. So are you just going to carry forward that exact surplus that we just moved from the 2021 budget line over to the 2020 actual?
Yeah, well, I can see where you're coming from. So whatever we don't use in 2020, are we going to use it in 2021 as the budget?
Yes.
Whatever's left over. Yes. And I don't know that number. So I can't put it in here right now.
Okay.
What we've got in there right now is with the money that we are receiving for the 2021 impacts, but I actually don't know that number right now. So I can't put it in the budget. It's sitting in deferred revenue. It's sitting on the balance sheet. So it is part of our equity. Okay.
Yeah.
Jeff has a point for you, Nicholas.
I'll just add, I think that it's a good question, and it's a complex thing because of the fact that frankly, it's 2020 money, but we've been authorized to continue to use it in 2021. And secondly, because of the nature of the 2020 year end, we're not able to tell you lost revenue compared to savings and expenses, and we're not able to tell you costs. So that will be a separate report. But suffice to say, we've been advised as municipalities that we should not be expecting a similar kind of injection in 2021. So we built the budget in a way that we know that we will have losses in revenue in certain areas. And when the manager of recreation and facilities presents the arena budget, you'll see that we are showing revenues that we realize we're not going to get. And we're doing that in a way to show that incurred or track that incurred loss so that it can legitimately be used to be funded by COVID-19 resiliency funding if we have enough. So it's a bit tricky about how we're going to manage this, but we have, we're showing it that way to illustrate the actual anticipated loss.
So, and then finally on that, if I may, so $102,000, there is no matching expenses in 2021 yet. You're showing it as revenue in 2021, but we have no matching expenses other than the $8,000 that you mentioned for the chamber.
Nothing that is matching, but I know in some of the budgets, they've continued to budget on the base budget from last year. So if you didn't get those revenues, that's going to be a revenue loss that we can apply this funding to. And some of the materials that we're going to be buying, we're still buying, the sanitizers and whatever else needs to happen. And it'll be within these materials and expense budgets. And so they'll be pulled out for this 2021 pot of money for what will be the COVID impacts on those expenses and lost revenue.
Right.
Hands up again.
And the follow-up, Nicholas, again, very good in that. And I think we got to a very fine point there. And that last part of that question is then that, yes, we have revenue coming in, and we'll be able to bring that revenue in, and it'll actually result in savings in the 2020 budget when we close out the 2020 year, I think is what you're getting to. And that savings would then drop out as surplus, which we will then put into reserves in the various places where those surpluses are realized.
Or carry it forward to reduce the tax levy this year.
You could do it that way, except we don't know the
I
amount.
don't know the number.
If we don't spend it, correct me if I'm wrong, they take it back. If it's not adequately put to what it has to be.
Yeah, slightly different question. So we have 2020 to apply it to, and we have 2021 to apply it to. And obviously the accounting to make sure that we're really have checked through our expenses and revenues to ensure that we've properly used it all. And if we weren't able to use it all in 2020, presumably they would ask for it back and we would send it back. That's an exercise that we have to go through in terms of cleaning up 2020 books. But this question that Nicholas is on about, which is a question in terms, it would fall out as reserve, or it would fall out as surplus. And that surplus, you're correct, Nicholas, and assuming that that when we move some COVID expenses to those costs, it'll result in falling out surplus. We haven't obviously accounted for that surplus yet, but as a general rule, we would move those surpluses into reserves for that year. And
if we don't have to give it back, I guess it's sitting in a deferred revenue right now. So it's sitting on the balance sheet. And we're going to pull from that. And I guess once the report comes to council with what the expenses are, lost revenue and so on, the bottom line will fall out of that. From that point, we will know, are we giving it back to the province, or we'll give council some options of what to do with it, with whatever is left over, if there is any.
All right.
Does that make sense?
Okay. Is there any other questions? Again, I can't see anybody.
I had a question, Deputy Mayor.
Dean Trentowski or Councillor Trentowski?
It's identified, the code number is 01-1200 9999. It's the last item under total expenses for general administration. It's page 2 of the tab 1, general administration. In the notes, there's a note saying council composition / ward boundary study, $50,000. I just would like to ask staff for some more explanation about the nature of that study and the expenses that are being allowed for.
I'm going to ask Carla Preston, the clerk, to speak to that. And thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Jankowski. You did give us a heads up. You were going to ask that, and I forgot to highlight it.
Just following up just quickly to Councillor Zvink's question about the safe restart. I think there was what other projects. You will note there were a number of expenditure increases included in the IT software for the online services to be funded from that same safe restart. But in terms of the council composition and ward boundary, so the question that you had asked earlier was kind of related to what are the kind of timelines associated with it, correct? Is that what you're kind of looking for?
Well, I was asking that question in February because I was trying to find out if this was something that had to be discussed sooner or later, and I'm seeing that it's showing up in the budget. It has to be discussed in 2021 as opposed to 2022. So I was trying to get a sense of the timing to know, to get more of an idea of what's involved with the process. But I guess in terms of the budget, I'm just concerned about hiring a consultant for $50,000 when some of that work could probably be done ourselves at less cost.
Yep. So I would agree. I think sometimes, we can overuse consultants, especially when in terms of a ward boundary and council composition process. You can see some municipalities have went through the process, the recommendations before council, and they still choose to, and because it is the council's decision to not make any changes. So in that case, the exercise was completed, but nothing was accomplished. So I will be honest in saying that can be the outcome if council is not on board. In terms of timeline, it can be done in a year. We would need to have it done for the 2022 elections, which would be, the bylaw would have to be in place by January 1st, 2022. Overall timeline would look like if, council approved the RFP and they be commenced to procure the services, the consultant would then undertake that ward boundary and council composition review, public consultation, and then bring the recommendations to council. But just kind of backtracking on that, kind of going back to that consultant and what we can do ourselves, I do want to make it really clear that under the Municipal Act, municipalities do have the ability, so council has the authority to pass a bylaw to do the ward, to separate the wards themselves. There is an ability for a resident or a person to appeal to LPAT for that decision. And for the council composition, council themselves does have the authority to determine that composition. And then that would take place for the next term of council. So you're right in terms of council has the authority, where it kind of gets into that, I don't want to use the word gray area, but where you'd always have a staff recommend a consultant is that independent review removes the perception that a staff member was kind of trying to make those decisions. So I hope I answered your question. I know that I kind of provided a lot of information there, but you are correct in saying you do not have to have a consultant. You'll notice that a lot of municipalities in the last year and a half did. Regional municipalities are required to, with the new changes in the Municipal Act, had to, for this term, had to do a review, and everybody else, it's just recommended every 3 terms. So the big holdback as well in terms of why are we doing it so late? Why didn't we do it previously? A lot of that has to come in place with a lot of municipalities. We're waiting to see what happened with the regional review, which wasn't pursued. The governance, model wasn't pursued as we had all anticipated that there was potential. If there's any more questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I see Councillor Rose has his hand up, but that's all I can see.
Councillor Rose?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, just for a bit of clarity, council composition, that means that could be cutting back on the amount of councillors?
Yeah, so maybe I should make that. So council composition can come in different forms. So it can be, one would be the size of council. So that came out recently in the remuneration review that was, no, it's the compensation. Jeff, if you can help me out with that review that was just recently completed by Ward and Upton Grove. And one of the recommendations was for West Perth to reduce the size of their council based on population. So that'd be one option. But the other thing that would come out of this review would potentially be voting at large versus voting by ward. Do you do recommendations whether or not the deputy mayor would be at large or be at large, or would it be nominated within council? So you'll see single tiers have to do it in this term as well. So those are the things that would be looked at in a composition, would be the size and whether it's a ward system or not.
Jeff has a point to Murray.
So just to support Carla's answer there, I just want to be clear that there's a bit of, there's a few reports that have recommended that we consider this. So this is why it's being brought forward at this time. The council remuneration report was one that suggested we might want to take a look at it. Certainly as staff, our sense is there's no appetite, but if we don't put the opportunity for a report before you and get an opportunity to have a consultant do the work on it, it'll always be status quo. So scoping just what work you want to do in the ward boundary distribution, I know that there was a ward boundary distribution report done, I believe, leading up to the election that would have been the 2014 election, if I've got the years right. And so it was not done in the last term of council, so it's been a while. And with what we're seeing in terms of the distribution of residents in our community, the ward boundaries can get a little bit out of skew in terms of number of voters. And this kind of review would be required to do an analysis and make sure that we've got the proper weighting. Again, we put it in as a report. Carla would have to confirm if we're legally required to do it, and we can then decide whether or not, if we're not legally required, if council has an appetite to proceed with these reports or get more information.
Murray, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, I guess it was just maybe more of a comment. Instead of council deciding if the constituents should lose their representation, is there any way that the voters can decide if they're okay with losing their vote power, so to speak?
Right, and that's part of the public consultation. So when the consultant gets involved, they look at all the studies, all the information. They make their recommendation based on being experts in the field, and then they go to public consultation on what the residents want. So sometimes that can alter the information or can support the data as well. So absolutely, public consultation is involved. The only other way would be to put a question on the ballot. The downfall to that would be, it'd be a single question for those voters at the time without anything additional being provided other than a question. And then you're looking at another entire term with status quo, which I'm not suggesting status quo isn't all right, but I'm just making that clear that it's another term of status quo.
If I could just one more thing on that. I think instead of the consultants trying to tell us what to do, it really should be left up to the voters. It's whatever they decide. And if they are okay with cutting back on council members, say as an example, in Mitchell only having 2 councillors instead of 3, or the townships only having 1 instead of 2, if they're okay with it, then that's okay. But I think they should have the decision, so to speak. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
And I do, in terms of wards, I do just in votership, just to be really clear, because some people aren't aware that when you are running for a term in wards, you do not have to be a member, you don't have to live in that ward to represent that ward within the Elections Act. Even within school boards, you don't need to even live within that school board to run as a school board trustee.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you, Jeff. Are any other, I can't see anybody, any other questions? If not, we'll.
Just one more comment, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I was just raising the nuts and bolts of the decision making. We can leave that for another day. I was just raising the point of the $50,000 because I know some taxpayers will say, why are you spending money on a consultant to figure out a solution that we could figure out ourselves anyway? So I understand the need for a third party neutral perspective, but there's the other side to consider as well going forward. But we can discuss that more at a future time. Thanks.
Thank you, Dean.
And if I may, Doug, again, I would, after Carla listed out everything from RFP to public engagement to writing a report, 9 months is a tight timeline to get a bylaw in place for if we looked at all of those steps that needed to happen. So I'm not sure now is the right timing for it, unless we're doing it ourselves.
And so I have confirmed, so I reached out to one of the more popular consultants that do a majority of the ones within Ontario, even a number of municipalities of our population. And they said it was tight, but they could ensure that it would be completed in time, that it could be completed within that time frame. But I do want to know, I believe it's Huron East. They didn't do in terms of council composition, they did not go to a consultant amongst themselves. They had decided and they had reduced themselves, I think, during last term. So municipalities of the size of West Perth absolutely do make that decision on their own.
Thank you, everyone. Hearing no one, we will now move on to Chief Hunter and the Fire Department, tab number 2, I believe. Bill?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Wright. The 2021 Fire Department budget that's before Council tonight is basically a continuation of the COVID-influenced year of 2020. Last year, we did see a slight reduction in the number of calls for service, with the exception of one large fire. I think that our overall hours would have been similarly down. As we entered 2021, we are anticipating that COVID will continue to impact us until there is widespread vaccinations and we can start to kind of get back to normal. As far as the numbers, as Council can see, we are projecting an overall 5.8% increase on our operations budget. But I wanted to bring to Council's attention that if we excluded the principal and interest on the fire station, that we are actually proposing an operations budget with a 6% reduction. So I'm certainly able to answer any questions from Council before I move on to the report on the second tanker.
Any questions for Chief Hunter?
Doug, if I may again.
Yeah.
So great work on the operation budget down year over year. So then I would like to comment on, since we are paying principal and interest for the new fire hall, we can estimate the age of this well-built and much needed fire hall. And then we still have capital contributions to the construction of the fire hall in the 2021 budget. Can you or Terry address another $50,000 in capital contributions to, is that to the next fire hall again?
So that is just the continuation of the project. It's not new money introduced to it.
So you're saying, yes, we have $50,000 in the capital fire hall construction line, but what you're saying is that's still paying for the just built fire hall? Because I thought
Yes.
we amortized that whole amount. over with the Infrastructure Ontario dollars?
Terry would have to speak to the amortization. If she's there.
Are you there, Terry?
I'm here, sorry, yes. So the the fire hall capital costs year to date in 2020 were 2.5 million, but we have incurred some costs in 2021 so far. So that's why we've put more money in the budget line for 2021. We haven't started the loan. We haven't, because we have to get our 2019 financial statements going in the FIR, but we are proposing to hopefully get those underway very shortly and go to Infrastructure Ontario and get debt proceeds of 2.12 million towards the cost of the fire hall, just like you did last year, but it never carried forward. So these other costs, I know there was some uncompleted work. The blinds were paid for. I don't have all the list. There was a few things that hadn't been paid for in 2020 that were getting completed in 2021.
Terry, Jeff has some insight into that too.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. Yes, thank you.
I can just add that the project is, as we've been saying, the project is essentially on time and on budget. I would point out to you that the number that we included in the 2020 budget number didn't reflect the number that was approved by council, and it was just a matter of the timing of budget approval and project approval at the same time. So when you see a budget of 2.3 million and an expenditure of 2.553, that was what should have been listed in the 2020 budget. In Keystone should have actually been a budget of 2.6, right around the 2.646 was the amount that council approved. And so we do have some costs extending into 2021, which answers Nicholas's question. And the question of how we amortize that, I'd have to defer to Terry, but there are some costs going into 2021.
Okay, if I may follow up again, Doug?
Yes.
Yeah, so the fire hall capital reserve is not even yet empty yet, but what I'm trying to say is either empty that reserve out, because that's what we needed it for to build the new fire hall, or don't have in the 2021 budget the 52,000, use the Infrastructure Ontario dollars for that $50,000.
Chief Hunter? Or, yeah.
Mr. Hunter?
Yeah, I would leave that to Terry to answer. How we still need to with asset management, there will still be starting this year a contribution to the fire station ongoing reserve so that we can start building it up again. But I do see what you mean, Councillor Vink, about basically emptying it, and then we can start again for 50 years down the road when the next building needs to be built.
Okay, so the fire building reserve that I see here has a balance at the end of 2020 of 28,655.84. So we can certainly bring that in. You're right. I'm not sure if there's going to be any more costs to this 52 for 2021. If there's any more costs, we can certainly change the amount of the loan request. That would just takes a little bit of reworking with whatever the interest, principal and interest would be. And because we haven't even, the application, I believe, was started last year, but we'd have to redo it because it's timed out, I'm sure, with Infrastructure Ontario. And we'd have to get what the latest rates are. March the 5th, they were 2.37% over 20 years. So yes, there is options there. We can certainly clean out. I'm not sure how much more expenses there will be towards it in 2021. We put in 52 because we were very close to that in the GL.
then I'd say don't bother with the Infrastructure Ontario, but at least reduce that by half by what's left in the reserve, in my mind.
Yeah. So if I may suggest, I think this is one of those questions that I think the risk of us sort of, we should actually come back to you with a comprehensive answer and just make sure that we've got, so I appreciate if you could leave that with us to report back at the next meeting we report on budget, and know that we hear you, that there's a concern about that number that you'd like a report back on.
Nicholas, good with that?
Yes, thank you.
We'll have to find out if landscaping and all that has to be done too, but it must have been in the tender, so. Yeah, so any other questions for Bill on the first part before he goes to the fleet? Now I can see is all seeing none. Bill, go ahead.
Great, thank you. So the second portion of my report deals with the fleet. As council can see, we are definitely in good condition with all of the trucks. The bulk of the report centers around the need for a second tanker and the decision that we'd be looking for from council. Just to recap, that 1996 tanker, the safety will expire in July, and as it reaches the end of its life of 25 years, and it will be disposed of at that time. So we have in the report, we're recommending that council purchase a second tanker. We've done a little bit of groundwork to come up with an estimate on what it would cost. In the report, we've costed it based on a 20-year loan through Infrastructure Ontario, but there's also a 25-year option, which would coincide with the total life expectancy of the truck. That would actually be a total annual payment of just over $19,000. And I'll gladly try and answer any questions on that before I move on to the next part.
I can't see anybody now, so because the screen split. Mayor McKenzie?
Well, I guess the concern that I have on some of this equipment, we have gone from budgeting and planning to purchase equipment and putting money away, and when you had the money sitting in reserve enough to buy it, you went out and bought it, and then you started over again. Somehow we've picked up from, I guess, the federal and provincial government, where we want to buy now and we'll pay for the next 25 years for what we get today, and then 25 years time we'll start all over again. We do have some money. Actually, I think we almost have enough money in the equipment reserve for that truck. But as you noted in your preamble, there's another truck that's going to be coming on the scene in a few years after that. So I just make my point that somehow we're getting into deficit financing instead of planning for the future and using our own dollars.
Thank you, Mayor McKenzie. Any Councillor Marshall?
Just curious, how many tankers do our neighboring municipalities have?
So Perth East, Cedarville Station has 2. Each of the Perth East stations have 2. Moncton has 1 tanker and a pumper tanker, and Seaforth has 2.
My only concern on this is, we just purchased a new tanker last year. There was nothing in the plan about another tanker now. It just seems that there's a failure of planning here somewhere. Either this previous tanker was too big, or we should have been looking at a way of getting 2 tankers, in previous years. So I'm just not sure where. I have concern going forward with this sort of thing.
The work on preparing the report for the second tanker came about from the June meeting in 2020. At that time, we had put the new tanker into service, and the resolution from council was to put the old tanker back in service for a year, and give us an opportunity to look into the need for a second tanker, which is what we've done. That's where the second tanker came from. I believe it was June the 1st of 2020 that report went to council.
Mayor McKenzie?
I think the thing you have to remember, you know, we've always only had one tanker. And for the last 30 years or more, it's all been older, smaller barns, bank barns. But now we're looking at multi-million-dollar farm buildings out there. Times have changed, you know, and I guess I'm saying that we have to be prepared to go with those changes too. It takes a lot more water to handle a $3 million barn than it does a $100,000 barn, for example. And we do have mutual aid, and I realize that, but it would be that much more water. If I may, at this time, I'm going to ask another question, and this one maybe is more for Terry. We do have money in reserve. How does that compare, the interest that we get on our money sitting in reserve and what we can borrow from Infrastructure Ontario?
We are getting 0.9% on our money sitting in the bank right at the moment. And the latest, well, the 20-year is 2.37 over 20 years. That's what we're looking at right now for the Fire Hall and Henry Street Bridge. And I know Bill and I looked at the tanker for 25 years and it was 2.86, I think, at the present time, right, Bill? For 25 years. Yeah. So, and I need to go like periodically keep looking at Infrastructure Ontario because they do change. Their construction rate's really low. It's 0.6.
Has a question? Go ahead, Dean.
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I would support Mayor McKenzie's idea that times have changed. The significance of a loss, especially on the rural properties, is much more extreme now than it was before. And from personal tragedy, I can attest to the impact of an economic and personal loss of such an event, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody ever again. So I think Chief Hunter's report underscores the importance of minimum annual contributions towards the equipment of the fire service. I do agree with Councillor Marshall's comment that there is an apparent failure of planning, and I think this is the attempt to rectify that failure, not so much a failure of recent times, but maybe in previous times. But as was discussed earlier, there was a $600,000 reduction in OMPF funding. So there's only so much you can do to plan for the future at any one time. And I think what Chief Hunter's proposing here is something to get us back on track with the fire service. And it would behoove us to look at it more closely and see, as Mayor McKenzie suggests, what we can do to finance as much of this equipment ourselves, rather than relying on the borrowing. Thank you.
Terry?
Bill and I chatted about this, and Bill, if I'm not mistaken, this would probably affect the 2022 budget, right? Now, because you're not sure that we could even get this tanker in this year.
Yes, because this report was actually, I drafted this report up based on the original budget meeting schedule. And there was a truck that could have been available in September or October. I'm suspecting that it's no longer available, but once again, if council gives me the direction, I would certainly investigate that. But it's still probably a very slim chance that this truck would be delivered in 2021, more than likely first quarter of 2022 at the earliest.
So therefore, it wouldn't affect this budget, except council's motion to get the project underway.
Correct.
Not financially.
I'm not supposed to ask questions, but I have a question, Bill. You said that one of yours is a tanker pumper. And I see here we need a pumper in 2028. So could we not just buy a tanker pumper? So both are, or maybe this is for another discussion outside of budget, so.
A tanker pumper is an option. One of the benefits of the truck that I'm proposing is very short wheelbase, basically 1,800 gallons of water, minimal amounts of equipment, just hose, pump, and water. It's basically just bringing water to rural fires. If you go with a pumper tanker, there are minimum standards that apply to pumpers. So now you're getting into number of ladders that it has to carry, the number of staff that it carries. You're creating a much larger vehicle, which will defeat the purpose that we really see this truck fitting into the fleet as a small maneuverable water carrier.
Thanks on my part, Bill. Anyone else of Mike Tam?
So, Bill, if it's the case that we can't get delivery of this tanker till 2022, early 2022 or whatever, we might be 6 months without a tanker. That's without a second tanker. We'll be disposing of ours, and that's not an issue.
I would love to keep it, but I honestly, my job's to reduce the risk to the municipality. And my opinion is that when that truck is 25 years old, we need to dispose of it, and we'll run without a tanker until a replacement can be acquired.
Is there you have more report here, Bill?
Doug, if I may again.
Oh, sorry, Nicholas. Yes.
Yep, that's okay. Chief Hunter, how many tankers would be required to fight a fire in, I'll say this, southwest end of Hibbert, 20 kilometers away from Mitchell? Is one enough? Do we need 3? Do we need 5? Do we need 10 tankers to keep up the water supply?
Depends on the size of the fire.
Okay, so we'll use Mayor McKenzie's example of a new large barn that we need to now fight the fire against.
Yes. So regardless of the size of the fire, our motto is always we would rather have more water than not enough. So we would always request mutual aid, even if we had 2 tankers. The benefit to having this second tanker is it gets that additional 1,800 gallons of water responding initially with the first responding units. The best way to stop a fire is to apply lots of water as early as possible in the fire. So that's where this is a benefit. A fully involved barn fire, this truck would become one of a fleet of probably 8 to 10 tankers that we would draw on from all across the area, whether it's Huron East or South Huron, or Moncton or Sebringville, or even St. Mary's tanker. We typically at barn fires try and call as many tankers as we can, but the important part that I can't stress enough to council is the importance of that extra water on the initial alarm when they're first arriving on scene. That's where you make or break, and how that first few minutes on scene go, that's how the whole fire is going to go.
Councilor Matheson? Carol?
I was just going to comment. I think that there was a significant fire on line 17 this past summer that had several different fire departments there, and several tankers were involved.
Yes, we drew tankers from basically every department in Perth County, the 3 stations in South Huron, and St. Mary's and Granton. We used anything that could haul water over that weekend we used.
Thank you, Bill. Seeing no more questions, you want to continue on?
Sure, just a little bit. The last portion is basically a snapshot from the strategic plan meeting, and basically provides council a timeline on our next big ticket capital items that will take you right through till 2034. Just want everyone to be aware of that. So that's basically the next 13 years. And I'll gladly try and answer any questions on that.
Mike, I saw Mike's, did Mike Tam's hand go up? Yep.
So we could expect that the pickup truck could be in there next year then, Bill?
Yeah, the pickup truck is, we've been basically band-aiding it each year. So my suggestion would be, depending on what council's decision is on the second tanker, if council decides that we are going to get the second tanker and we'll pay for it in 2022, we could try and get an extra year, see if we could stretch the pickup truck into 2023. Maybe even 2024, just to ease the financial burden on the municipality. But I do want you to be aware that that pickup truck, we are keeping a very close eye on it, because it is past its best before date, that's for sure.
Anyone else? Oh, Mayor McKenzie?
Well, I go back, I guess, to my original comment, and I appreciate the information that Bill has given us. And this is probably a report for another time down the road, but we know the costs that we're looking at over the next few years. And, you know, with asset management, I think we should be looking at how much money we would have to set aside to meet those costs. And I realize the one big one there for $1 million is going to be a hard one. We may have to, but again, I guess I get back to my original point that we should be putting money away for when those vehicles have to be replaced.
If you could scroll to the next slide after the capital items for 2034, there's a spreadsheet. And what I've done there is estimated the replacement costs. This is for all of our current apparatus. Doesn't include the potential second tanker. We're currently putting away $70,000 a year, which, based on the current replacement value, is $44,467 short each year. So that is an additional amount of money that we should be putting away, so that there is money in reserves in the future for these large replacements. And that certainly is something that the council could be considering.
Thank you, Bill. Nicholas?
Yep, thanks, Doug. If I may, if there's a need for an additional tanker back to that in the rural area, could we not use development charges to help pay for that tanker?
Oh, Jeff, Rick?
Yeah, so it's a good question, but with no lack of controversy. Our current development charges bylaw does not include, it is only applying to residential in the rural areas, not farm. So we're not applying the development charges to farm. There is a municipality to the north of us that did a consultation on that, and it wasn't very well received in their recent update to development charges. The same time we updated ours, or slightly before we updated ours. It is something to consider in the future, that I think that the change that's occurring is that the investments in rural agricultural, sort of sophisticated rural agricultural operations begin to rival the investments in urban commercial. operations. And I'm obviously aware of the difference, but I'm saying to you that the amounts of money invested are becoming closer in our urban centers where we try to encourage development to go for commercial industrial. We have water. So the way to respond to that in rural areas would be, we're going to have to perhaps add tankers, which is this very discussion. But our development charges, as it's built today, our development charges bylaw does not capture development charges from those large investments on agricultural. And it would have to be brought back through a development charges study and development charges review. And that's a decision for council to make when the development charges bylaw is ready to be updated.
So going forward, Nicholas, if you might want to put that in your back pocket and bring that up, that we could do something down the road next year, or whenever it comes up every year, I believe.
Comes up every 4 years.
Every 4 years, so it'll be the new term of council. Anyone else for Chief Hunter? Are you done, Bill?
Unless there's any other questions.
Nobody's waving at me, or Walter's not me, so, okay, thank you, Bill. We'll move on to building department and Bob. CBO Bob, there he is.
Thank you, Chair Height. We're on tab 3 for everyone's information. Projected, not sure which way to look here, which screen are my notes? Projected building permit revenue this year is going to be around 329,000 based on our 3-year average and what we've experienced over the last couple of years with growth. We've had market study, which accounts for the wage increase shown in the 2021 budget. We're intending on doing a shift with the building inspector and bylaw enforcement so that we're utilizing Matt's expertise in the building department to maximize our inspections and plans review. We still have money in the budget for bylaw enforcement, so if everything goes according to the survey, we should be in pretty good shape for the department this year. Any questions?
Any questions for Bob? I always have the same question for you, Bob.
Certainly.
At what point will these large agricultural businesses be required to have a water supply there? Like, if it's commercial, it is, but say a 5,000 head sow barn. At some point, the province would have to dictate that they needed a water supply. Like, I don't want to say names, but I know commercial properties in the country have to have water supply to fight fire.
Correct.
But at what point will farms become big enough entities that they will also have to, will their insurance company or will the building department enforce that?
I would suggest it's going to be a function of their insurance coverage to provide on-site water. We're anticipating the updated Ontario or Canadian Farm Building Code in the next 6 months that should lend itself to fire safety and those requirements you're speaking of. On-site water is a valuable resource, whether it be for firefighting or for any other production on the farm. The fire department, the building code won't speak to fire protection in rural areas as far as farm buildings go. They tried that out west 20 years ago, and it completely wiped out the investment in agricultural updating. So it flatlined the industry out there for quite a while. So there has been some consideration and discussions around the National Farm Building Code mirroring a modified Ontario Building Code for an F3 building, which is a low hazard industrial occupancy. I don't think that has any traction, but we'll have to wait for the National Farm Building Code to come out to review that.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Does anybody else have any questions for Bob? I'm gonna ask Walter to shut his camera off as his computer has run out of power. And he's looking at the ceiling. So next up on our list would be Carla. Oh, just hold on. Walter, can you shut your speaker off?
That's one again.
We've got the extension cord now. Carla, can you enlighten us on protection services?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Here we are. So protection services, this includes both the police service board and bylaw enforcement. I can confirm that we did have a police services board meeting today. It was a regular scheduled meeting this morning, and they did reaffirm that the budget they presented before you. I just want to highlight that included in their request for one-time special project is an additional speed sign. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions that for Carla on the police services board? I have one. When is our contract with the OPP done? It's been a few years, I think, and I'm not sure how long we signed it up for.
I think it's 2020, the end of 2022. It was 17.
And it was a 5 year.
Yeah, I believe it's, so I think 2022.
Yeah.
But we did sign with them in 2017, just the middle of 2017.
Oh, Jeff has a comment.
Yeah, I'll just mention very quickly that we are anticipating some changes in the way OPP contracts are being prepared and contemplated, and whether or not they will continue the way they are. And that those changes are anticipated by the end of the year. The police services boards have only been given a heads up that some changes coming from the Solicitor General, and so we can only anticipate that there may be changes the year goes on, and that contract may be subject to slight change.
And I think we've included that on the agenda in the past in terms of board composition, and it was part of the Police Services Act review. There's a consultation that went around to municipalities.
Councilor Harrell?
Yes, I just want to mention about the speed sign. During our police services board meeting this morning, we did review whether or not we were fully interested in the speed sign, and it's a unanimous for approval with police services board that we really do feel the speed sign is a good investment for the community safety, and we got full support from the OPP on that decision also.
Thank you. So is that it for protective services?
That's correct.
Okay. So we'll move, there was no other questions. We'll move on to transportation, Mike Kramer. Mike, are you there?
Okay, oh, there you go. Yeah, we popped on for a second there, Mike. Good.
Are we good now?
Okay, thanks for coming on, Mike.
Perfect. For some reason, it double clicks on me here. We'll just highlight some of the large changes, quite similar to what Bill Hunter discussed. You can see our long-term debt charges here with interest is estimated at $21,240 for this year. The other major items, you can see a major increase in our gravel resurfacing, which we already tendered. So we know those are the best costs that we received, and fuel and aggregate costs have gone up substantially. And also, we still have $15,000 in here for our 911 signs. We're primarily done that project. However, quite a few intersection signs were stolen, so we had to replace all those. And we also were missing quite a few rural community signs and address were missed and all that. So we have a little bit of follow-up to finish and complete that project, but it's about 95% done. And the other items that jump out, of course, snow plowing and removal. I based an increase on that, and that's just an estimate, but I based it on our highest year that we received on an average. And I did this year's 2021 January and February monthly estimates on that. So it's an increase there, but hopefully we don't have that a bad winter in the fall, and we'll stay on that budget. And the other major item that jumps out is the insurance for the shop. It more than doubled. It went from 47,000 up to 115,000 this year. So those control and those costs are out of my hands. We have putting back into the reserve to 300,000 because we depleted our equipment reserve last year, purchasing the grader. We are trying to get back to the 420,000 in the reserve, which is 1 year's of operating equipment purchases for the roads department. And then for the equipment, we've already tendered for the tandem dump truck. And also we're planning on a 3/4 ton truck. And then also you'll notice in there that last year we tendered for the 1 ton chassis and truck to replace unit number 69 here in Mitchell. However, it was ordered in May, and I just received confirmation from Reliable Ford last week that it is now finally in the production line, and we should be getting it within the next month and a half. So it's over a year due to the silicon chips and computer chips in the vehicles. We have Henry Street Bridge. We had to finish the surface asphalt on that. Nelson Street reconstruction is our major reconstruction project this year for full reconstruction from Eleanor to Henry. Mitchell resurfacing, that is our pavement preservation along with repaving West Street and Mitchell. So we'll pulverize that and pave it with HL4. Eleanor is a top coat paving to finish that project, same with Toronto Street. The general construction of 140,000, that includes miscellaneous projects, but it also includes 30,000 for installing a Henry Street pedestrian crossing. I'm not sure if that project will go. It all depends on the developer to the west, the north west and his development proceeding. We might have some conflicts there. And also it includes Clayton Street resurfacing to finish that subdivision agreement off, and also includes $70,000 of our railway crossings out in the rural community. It was mentioned a couple of months ago about me following up on that, and we finally received approval from Goderich Exeter Railway, and we received pricings from a contractor to do that paving. It's due to the near miss that we almost had with a train and a grader operator. So that is in the budget as per council's request. We already tendered for our major bridge structure of 028F, which is a joint boundary project with Perth South. We are also wanting to tender for 003M, which is our St. Andrew Street Bridge. We have a substantial amount of deck repairs to do on it. Everything underneath and the girders and everything are in good shape. It's all the bridge deck and the rails. And then we have our typical sidewalk replacement in there again. And council is fully aware that we've deleted 2 of the rural projects for paving and we're now doing all of line 53 and with Brantco. So that is the roads budget or transportation. Is there any questions?
Okay, now I can, Councillor Matheson?
Just, will a lot of these tenders be closed before our next possible budget meeting, or?
No, we are sitting on everything right now, but I'm quite concerned that the number of contractors out there for our reconstruction are dwindling every day. King Cardin is closing, I think, tomorrow. That's another big project that we're going to lose some potential bidders on. And we know what the paving contractors are already dealing with. They're swamped and booked. And the amount of subdivisions that are going on in all these communities, because we know that there's a worse house shortage. So a lot of these are doing the residential, commercial, and an ICI projects too. So the sooner that we can get these projects moving, the more bids we'll get, which will be in better pricing.
Anybody else have a question for Mike? Nicholas?
Would it be ever an option, Mike, then to say, all right, let's budget for these construction projects this year, but let's have the work done next year so that, all right, we'll have the bids and tenders ready. We approve the budget. We're not under the gun. We're not paying premium pricing because we're last. So, all right, now let's have it scheduled for next year. When they're now looking for work to book up for next year, we could be one of the first that they're looking to book up and possibly have some better pricing.
Yeah, we can always do that. We just fall a year behind. We already are working on projects planning for 2022. We've already pre-surveyed them. Henry Street from St. Andrew to Pond is already pretty much done and ready to go for next year. It's just that the circumstances that we fell under this year with the slight delay in the budget is kind of catching up with us, especially in my department, just because of the year. But this is why we should discuss with council and our strategic planning back in November and December and get these capital projects in front of council prior to April. We're in March now, prior to this time, so we are well ahead of the game.
So rather than falling a year behind, we do 2 years in one. So the money we would put aside this year and then do 2 years in one. So instead of paying the premium pricing for this year, we would do both years next year.
Yeah. It's up to council. It's just, there's so many contractors in town around, and construction is quite disruptive. It's up to council if you want to have like multiple construction projects going on in town all at the same time.
And then secondly, if I may, Doug?
Sure, Nicholas.
Would you ever consider the snow plowing and removal, instead of budgeting at the worst case scenario, that we budget at, say, the 75th percentile? It doesn't have to be what the average is. Let's meet somewhere in between average and worst case scenario.
Yeah, I really basically do that, Nicholas. It's an estimate and a guesstimate. If we go over, we're still going to be having those costs. It's a guesstimate year to year. But typically, yeah, I don't take the high of the high. I even looked at 2020 numbers. 2020 was a weird year where we had basically no snow in January, February, or March. We had a lot of freezing rain events, but not a large amount of snow accumulation.
Thank you. Mike Tam has a question.
My question and comment is, I'm not a big fan of consultants and reports and that sort of thing, but I think one place that we need to look in the near future is the gravel resurfacing. Like that's 6% of our budget now. And if you told people that the money we spent on gravel roads in the last 5 years to build the fire hall, it would blow their minds. I just think that it's getting a little bit carried away. whether we cut back to every third year instead of every other year, or if we look at acquiring a pit in the future and selling resources, I don't know, but it's a big number.
It is. We out in the rural community, 50% of the road, 52% are paved, 50% are gravel. We spend 1.2 on pavement, and we right now are spending close to about 650, 680 on gravel. So if you do that comparison, I think it's adequate, but that's a council decision. We just can't forget the gravel roads because it's a wearing course, and that they have to be maintained also. And once you get them to a certain point, it's going to cost you actually more down the road.
Mayor McKenzie had a question.
The second last item there is the traffic lights on St. George Street. I would assume that whoever was involved with that, their insurance should stand good for that. Will they not, Mike?
Yes. So I don't have any estimates on what those actual costs are going to be. We already submitted a complaint, a notification to our insurance company. She is dealing with it. I only could base numbers off of what I had for railway crossings. And a railway crossing that I got for a price back in 2018 was around 260,000. Southold, I had a meeting with them on Monday morning here. They're still trying to get pricing. Of course, materials and steel and everything is ridiculous right now, and they can't get pricing. But hopefully this year we'll get it. We'll get the lights, street traffic signals repaired. We just don't know when the insurance claim is actually going to be completed, whether it will be in 2021 or 2022 moving forward, but it is covered.
Thank you, Mike. Does anybody else have any questions for Mike? Do you have more stuff, Mike?
Well, Doug, I have another question then. So if it is going to be covered, then why would we have it in the budget?
Because we have to pay for the costs up front and then deal with the insurance companies fighting for the claims.
So in 2021 or 2022, we might see $400,000 of revenue coming into the transportation?
Yes, it'll be offset.
And
we just can't account for the revenue when it's going to come in, Nicholas. So right now it's just sitting as an expense.
And then I'll back, since you mentioned insurance, what was that, an internal allocation that shop insurance jumped by $70,000 that we decided to internally push more of the insurance costs there?
I'll let Terry answer that question. It's just the number that she gave me.
I guess from my understanding, the insurance company did appraisals, came and looked at a lot of the assets in the buildings and so on within the municipality. And there was some missing off of the list. That list has been sent, I believe, to the managers to double check to make sure that everything's listed in the insurance company so we're covered properly. So those numbers came kind of from the broker. There was a breakdown that staff had asked the broker for all the buildings and so on. And then there's the liability portion that gets broken out, and it's broken out by like a percentage of budget and so on. And so we're trying to bring it to more actual.
The allocation is slightly different.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The way the allocation was calculated is slightly different.
Oh, okay. The way the allocation was calculated was slightly different and everything. And I guess that came from the broker too. So plus the fact that we're getting more up to date on what the actual values of our assets are. Yeah.
And or Terry, is you sitting there?
I'm sorry, pardon?
If there's any other questions when is that your mic then?
I think so, yes, if there's no more questions, Deputy Mayor.
I think Terry, you're right there. You're on for the mobility bus.
Okay, I don't have a whole lot to say on this one because I don't know much about the program. All I do know is that there is an agreement between the municipality and the mobility bus group that the municipality allocates $12,000 a year to them. And I believe it's up at the end of 2021, if I'm not mistaken. So the grant that you see of $31,280 is an actual grant from the federal gas tax for transit. And that did come as a letter to say we are getting that grant. And from my understanding, this grant gets transferred over to the mobility bus. So the corresponding expense is the grant plus the 12,000, which leaves 12,000 as a levy requirement for the municipality.
Is there any questions for Terry? Seeing none, as our good mayor always told me, after 2 hours of sitting in the chair, everybody needs a 5-minute break. So I've seen some people yawning, and I've seen I need to get up. So we're gonna take a 5-minute break. Won't be any more than 5 minutes. Mike, you can get some more chips, and then we'll be right back here. All right?
Yep.
We'll start with Mike Kramer again.
Okay, we are good to go.
We're good to go. We're back here for the second half of doubleheader tonight. So Mike, the streetlights.
Okay, take number 2. This is a user fee system. Just want to clarify that I think in the paper copies you're showing that we have $25,000 that we're planning for streetlight replacements. The real and true number, I think in your digital copy, is correct, showing 35,000. And this is to replenish our inventory of streetlight fixtures that we have depleted due to the fact that we provide them to the developers to install in our new subdivisions or areas, and then we build them back. So we have Kenton and Clayton Street coming on stream, and hopefully Wimpole Street this year. And currently we only have 9 street lights in our inventory. So this is to replenish that. So other than that, it's nothing really else to add.
Questions for Mike on streetlights? Seeing none. Mike, you're up again on solid waste services. Tab 8.
Okay, we increased our bin fees and revenues to offset our contracted fees this year. So there really isn't much change. I'd like to point out that the large expense additionally that we typically don't have is the landfill building maintenance. We have to install new methane gas monitors in our buildings there, and that's a cost of $40,000. And then it's been recommended to us also that we install security cameras on the site to help deter from events and claims, and especially with COVID going on and the potential of our steel bin out there, people getting into that also. So the only other thing I'd like to point out too is, once again, we'll be working on the landfill municipal drain and building up the side berms at our landfill, and that's an estimated cost once again of $50,000. I'll take any questions.
Mike? Seeing none. Oh, Cheryl?
There was a directive given last council meeting. I'm just wondering if that is going to fall in somewhere in this budget, or what the costs are going to be for that directive that was given.
Are you talking about the Logan landfill, Cheryl?
No, there was the other directive of for the services out here at the south end.
Oh, that's currently not in the budget. No.
No, so that's what I was just wondering,
Yeah.
if it's in the budget, if it's gonna be a cost that's incurred.
Yeah, we have consulting fees, but that's for sanitary sewers.
So that would go in this budget in here somewhere.
Yep. No, sewers would go into wastewater. This is landfills.
Okay,
Sorry, that's what's confusing me.
yeah, okay,
Okay.
jumping my question.
Anything else? Moving on, it's cemeteries.
Good, thank you, sorry. So yeah, cemeteries, one thing, nothing of significance to note in terms of the expenditures, but with the exception of, you'll notice in 2021, we've broken it down by each active cemetery and Society of Friends. So this only includes active cemeteries. In the previous budgets, they were rolled up into one and not separated separately. And so you'll see that some of the budgeted amounts, they were based on 2019 and 2020 average actuals. Currently in this budget, where hopefully we can get into the 2022 budget, would be allocating contracted services out and staff costs going forward. But that's something that we'll have to do in future years. Is there any questions?
Any questions for Carla on cemeteries? Seeing none. Darcy, Recreation and Parks.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ite and Council. I'll just go through a few highlights of mine. One thing that you'll find is the revenue is close to the same as past years. We aren't budgeting the loss due to COVID. That'll be funded with the COVID money that comes in. So we will be showing a little less revenue than what's actually in the budget, but we will offset that with COVID money. Wages, you'll see, are a little up and down. We are really trying to align that with what actually happens by taking timesheets of staff, looking at where they've been, what hours they've been there, and align it so we really get the true costing of each center. You will notice there's a Veterans Park, $25,000 to redo Veterans Park. That is the parkette, a walking trail, some community boxes, community garden boxes, which we received a grant for, and a few flower beds and trees. So that is for that. Another one is a $5,000 design for the final location of the skate park. That's part of the Ketterson Park Master Plan. Part of the couple of next phases is that we start to look at the skate park. So we put 5,000 in to get the design, use MTV to plan a final spot and budget for the final location of the skate park. And the other one would be the pool audit for $6,000. That's bring a company in and really look at the thickness of the concrete around the pool and the pool shell, and see what kind of shape it's in, and get a grocery list of stuff that we need to look at over the next few years. As well as in the capital, the Ketterson Pavilion, we have the final numbers for it, and this will be the final contribution of the municipal portion of the ISIP grant. As well as there's an arena project for $425,000. That's to replace the roof. So that's the roof on top of the kitchen and down along the Morenz room. We did the hall roof a couple years ago. They're the same age, and this one has now started leaking. We actually got lucky. We were able to do a little bit of a fix to get through the winter, but it was leaking in the fall of last year. And then that is also to do siding throughout the facility and insulation. So as you guys will probably remember in the report that we had of the community center hall, the insulation had all fallen to the bottom of the wall because of the age. We are seeing the same throughout the building. There's one wall here that sometimes we have to leave the water run a little bit if it's really cold, because the water lines will freeze in that wall. So we're looking to do insulation throughout the whole building, which will also help us extend our ice season as well as some efficiencies throughout the year. And the other one is the arena reserve. We're putting $200,000 into the arena reserve. This is kind of speaking to what Mayor McKenzie spoke about, is we realize that our ice pad is going to be at that 50-year mark in 2024. So start to put some money away now to help us pay for that when that life expectancy comes up. So I will gladly take any questions in regards to my budget.
Any questions for Darcy? Seeing none. Still seeing none, we'll move on to general facilities, Rosemary, the library.
I think you want to do this
Oh.
second tab for Darcy, right?
What was, oh, sorry, just
General
a second for,
facilities. General facilities.
oh, general facilities, okay, under Darcy. I was thought the general facilities was less, there, whatever. Darcy and general facilities.
Yeah, I can gladly take any questions. There's not a lot to highlight. It's a lot of the same stuff. Again, the staffing has changed a little bit just because we are allocating staff to the outside facilities because they are there, and we are seeing that on the timesheet. So I'll gladly take any questions.
Any questions on general facilities? Darcy? None? Now I believe I'm going to move on to Rosemary at the library.
Good evening. The library's 2021 budget proposal looks relatively similar to previous years with a couple of exceptions. One of them is relatively minor, though it will have a major impact on some community members. In the fall of 2020, the library board passed a motion to eliminate the collection of overdue fines. Overdue fines are a financial barrier to library service for many people in the community. And in addition, the budgeted revenue of $4,000 was not attainable in 2020 and won't be in 2021 due to the requirement for us to quarantine items before putting them back into circulation because of the pandemic restrictions. In any case, the West Perth Public Library is joining a growing number of libraries across North America that have eliminated the financial barrier to service. The second exception is more impactful. In November 2020, the library board passed a motion to extend the library's regular hours of operation. The only way to do this is to expand the work hours of existing staff and to add a minimum of 2 part-time staff members. These additional hours and people will increase the level of public service we can provide in a few different ways. First, it addresses the current health and safety concern of staff members working alone on a regular basis. This is not an ideal situation, and it contradicts best practices in staffing municipal buildings. And additional hours will help us keep our colleagues safe. Secondly, additional hours and staff will also allow the library to contribute not only to its own strategic plan priorities, but to the municipality's strategic plan and to the recreation and leisure master plan by offering programs, services, community outreach, volunteer and employment opportunities to the residents of West Perth. So these strategic plans are promises we've made to the community, and the library is willing and anxious to help the municipality fulfill these promises through increased engagement in the community. We can only do that with more staff hours, and this request does have the full support of the library board. I believe the library board chair, Jesse Britton, is joining us for this meeting, and he and I will be happy to answer any questions about the budget proposal.
I don't know. Oh, there he is. Right,
There he is. Yay.
right in the middle. Any questions for Rosemary or Jesse? Councillor Marshall?
So what are the extended hours going to be then?
The regular open hours, not the hours we currently have due to the pandemic restrictions, but regular hours are 44 hours, and the library board would like that extended to 54 hours per week.
Does that answer your question, Jeff? Because my question would be, for 10 more hours, it's costing us $80,000.
It's it's the additional 2 part-time staff members, but it's also increasing the part-time hours of the current part-time staff members. So it's the extra hours, the extra people allow us to address the health and safety concerns of working alone. The additional hours to existing staff allows us to contribute to the strategic priorities for the library strat plan, the municipal strat plan, and the recreation and leisure master plan.
Any other questions? Can we back at the end of the year to say how many people came in those hours? Remember, I was the one who asked for the survey. Everybody clicked yes, want to open the whole time. So that's maybe something I'll bring up to the library board on my own. Thank you.
I just had a comment, Mr. Chairman. Just in doing that analysis, I would weigh the money spent versus the education earned by the users of the library when you do make that presentation and do the analysis. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Rosemary, you wrote that down. I had a kind of a tough time hearing Dean, and so did Murray Rose.
I can repeat it if you like. When Mr. Carnegie founded these libraries, the intent was to spare no expense on the education of future generations. It's probably in Mr. Carnegie's charter somewhere. So when we make this analysis of money spent, also include the amount of education earned by the people using the library for the betterment of the community. Thank you.
Now, Anne Marie's shaking her head. She'll do that. Any other questions for the library staff? Seeing none, we'll go on to planning. Jeff.
Thank you. It's a very straightforward budget. It's a significant reduction from previous years. And the reason that we have the reduction in this budget relates to the shift to a new planning model with the County of Perth. And we no longer are contracting planning services after March 1st from Perth East. So there's been a bit of an upload. There's been an upload of services within the planning, within the budget of the county. The other thing that's happened is that we've increased the fees for planning applications to more closely align with the cost of doing those applications. So there's a savings to the county, which presumably has been reflected in their budget requisition back to us to cover this service. So I'd be happy to attempt to answer your questions if there are any.
Any questions about the planning model presented by Jeff? Seeing none, Jeff's going to take the floor for the committees. Economic development, I guess you'll dictate what it.
I'll just be very quick on economic development as well. The economic development details are in the budget. One thing that we are trying to do, and you're seeing some money move around between codes, we're working to disentangle the Heron Business Park budget and almost in a job coding kind of way, where we show all of the revenues and expenses related to that Heron Business Park. And we'll be setting up codes in a refined code structure so that's easily tracked using the accounting system. And we want to do that because that will allow us to establish our cost of service, cost to buy land, and that will establish what we'll sell, because our philosophy for industrial lands is that we recover our costs on the sale of lands. And then the other code for lands will be all other lands, which we have been, in some cases, absorbing land sales into just general revenue, and in some cases carrying it in reserves to use to prepare other lands. So you'll see a change in coding over time. And the only other thing I would note with the economic development budget is that I lost my train of thought. The one I thought of that I should mention is we're going to add money to the economic development budget to do another economic development newsletter. And we have money in there. And I'm kind of dancing around about that one a little bit because I said I would never do that again, but I think it's a tremendously good newsletter, very valued by everyone. And I think we have to do the things that are the right things to do. And I want to just mention that we didn't take debt because we didn't get the projects done. So for example, the Heron Business Park, we had hoped that we could get design work done, purchase land, and begin to build that stormwater pond, and that didn't occur. So it wasn't taken as debt, and that's some of the in and out that's showing in the reserves. So if there's questions, we can try to answer them.
Any questions for economic development? Seeing none, we'll move on to, what's the next one?
Heritage and culture.
Heritage and culture.
Sure. The heritage and culture budget is before you. If there are questions, I think we can try to answer them. I don't have anything to highlight on that one.
Any questions about heritage and culture? And then I see the last thing on this list is the grants and donations.
So on grants and donations, we brought forward the same amount of money. We've made a commitment to council, which has been delayed somewhat due to COVID, to bring forward a new policy for grants and donations. And so we've left the amounts in that you've seen in previous years, so that money is available, including support money, for example, for Broadhagen and minor sports to support them. And I would mention that the rural roots tree planting money is shown in that area of the budget.
Any questions for Jeff on grants and donations? I have one, the $6,500 we used to give to the youth center. That is our project now, I believe. So
yes, so the revenue
will take that.
It'll move from this budget into the recreation budget. So the expense is here and the revenue will be received in recreation.
For environmental, forestry, and trails.
And so on the environment, forestries, and trails, I want to first of all say that we've had a really difficult time getting this meeting scheduled for this group, and they've been very patient. They have some projects they want to do, but they haven't had an opportunity to see this budget. We're going to try to get that meeting off on April the 7th. I believe is the day we picked Councillor Marshall as the chair of that committee. And this budget, like in other years, we are bringing forward a number of the initiatives. There's a couple of new initiatives that are in here, which I think are great initiatives in terms of wildflowers, a pollinators project, a little bit of revenue coming in from anticipated donations. And one other thing I would mention in here is that we're also proposing 2 benches. And we'll be working with this group on a standard for benches and trying to come up with a procurement process to standardize our benches. And that money is in this budget. They would be in the wetlands. And finally, the money that we've been spending on knotweed and the money we intend to spend on Phragmites is brought into this budget.
Any questions for Jeff on Jeff Marshall?
Just curious, don't see it, and maybe I'm missing it. We talked about signage for our trails for this year. We talked about it. Had it in the budget for last year. Is it in here or is it in the? Am I missing it somewhere?
Right. I'm going to ask for Darcy's help with this one. So I believe we concluded that we still see that as a high priority project, but yeah, we dropped it out of 2021 though because we just don't see ourselves getting to it. Is that correct, Darcy?
I have trail signage in my budget of $6,000 to do trail signage.
Trail signage transfer and parks budget from trail reserve.
Okay.
Line something. It's in the, it was put in reserves, Jeff.
And
thank you.
It's in Darcy's. The next one,
BIA.
BIA, Jeff?
Yes. So we certainly, the BIA budget is always approved by the BIA, or BIA has input to it at their annual general meeting. The BIA annual general meeting is scheduled for April the 7th in the evening. The budget that we brought forward with BIA has been done up in consultation with the board, and it would be anticipated that the BIA would approve that budget at their AGM. And between chair of the BIA, Councillor Rep Bell, and myself, we can answer any questions if there are any.
Any questions in conjunction with the BIA? Seeing none, it looks like we're moving on to drainage and Carla.
Looks as though I have all the exciting ones. In terms of drains, there's nothing really to comment. This is the allocation that we set aside every year with the increase, I believe, in annualization. If there's any questions. This is always a tough one in terms of budgeting because we can't anticipate when a project's going to be built out or when it's going to be completed. So we usually stick with this standard.
Any questions for Carla? I thought at a meeting one time they asked how much money we actually have lent out for drainage. Was that like how many people have tile drains?
So just are you speaking in terms of like the tile loans, or you mean that bit like
the tile
loans? That would be, I think that's included in the revenue. Do you know, Terry?
I'm just looking at it right now. So I have a tile drain loan schedule right now, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different tile loans out right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. There's no other questions? So now we go on to wastewater.
Yeah, so wastewater, as Terry mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, is a user fee system, a cost recovery. The real major items I'll point out is the repairs or maintenance to the buildings. This includes a lot of repairs on some major components. I'll list a few of them. We need a PLC replacement, check valves. We have to do some valves in the dry well. A major cost is the master control center at $90,000, and then we have to secure the wet well hatches and do a bunch of other repairs. The reason for this expense is why it's gone up from the previous years is just because we've been asking, and we did the variable high-speed blowers that we installed at the wastewater treatment plant over the last couple of years, and those were major expenses. So we stalled and did that project instead. And you'd see the cost savings recovery already in the hydro in the bills from that project. The other major items is the vehicles. We're looking for a half-ton to replace the 2010 or 2012 Ford pickup, and we're also looking for potentially replacing the ambulance, the 2006 service vehicle ambulance. And that'll be cost shared between the water department also, so that's a 50-50 split. Any questions?
Cheryl?
This is where I'll put my question back in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So for the direction from Mayor Directive on March 17th, would this fall under this budget?
Yeah, so we have the consulting in the budget. We have some additional costs. That won't be too much additional cost because they did that rate study back in 2004 when we did the water systems, or 2005. We just have to update the actual true cost of construction now in today's dollars, along with the materials being used. So that's not going to be a huge expense. And this project will probably not take effect until probably 2022 or 2023. If it does proceed and go ahead.
Any other questions for Mike? We'll slide right on to water.
Also, cost recovery system, our revenues are covering our operating expenses and capital. Once again, we have a fair amount of maintenance that we'd like to do at the plant. We've also increased our sludge hauling due to the volumes that we receive from our commercial customers. Other than that, once again, 50% of a half-ton pickup in the used ambulance. And the other major item is just the cost of the Nelson Street reconstruction. Those are the only two capital items regarding water this year. Any questions?
Any questions for Mike? You'll have to speak up if you do. I only have 3 people on the screen. Hearing none. Oh, and now seeing none. We will, I guess, thanks, Mike. We'll move on to reserves. Terry.
Okay, these are, so what I mentioned before, these are the supporting documents for the transactions that happen in all of the various department line item budgets. So I took the 2019 balance that was there. I tried to make some, put in the 2020 transactions that we have to date to come up with a balance of 2020. And then you'll see the 2021 transfers to and from the budgets, and then an estimated total for the reserves. Now, there is a lot of work to be done on these reserves. I don't know a lot about them. I haven't had time to really look at them and delve into exactly why they're there. And maybe we can, I look at them and there's quite a few to me. And I think we can, at some point, a project of mine, a suggestion is that we need to look at each one of these. I think they need to be, there needs to be some consolidation. It's a report to council for sure. Whether, you know, we look at the fire one, or we look at roads, or any of the other ones that have multiples, and why are there multiples? Is there a reason for that? And maybe we can start consolidating some of these and with council, of course, approval. And then any transfers to and from, of course, would be by council motion also. So there's, I think, just some work to be done to clarify some of these reserves and what they're used for and what their intention is. And also, some reserves have their own bank balances and others don't. And trusts are in here for the cemetery, and they should be separated out. They're trust funds, they're money that isn't even consolidated in the municipal finances. We should be looking at splitting out the obligatory reserves, and they should actually have their own bank balance, because we have to keep track of interest. Something like parkland fees. It's showing up in the budget as a revenue and expense. It doesn't even need to go in there because it's an obligatory deferred revenue. So, and it belongs in its own bank account. The gas tax funds, per financing agreement with them, needs to be in a separate bank account, or at least interest allocated to it, which is a harder job to begin with when you start trying to separate out interest in one big lump sum. So it would be better in a separate bank account, and it has to be reported that way if there's any reporting on that to the province. Some of them should be reserve funds, particularly the water and the wastewater should have their own funds. The street lights, some of them should have their own funds. A lot of them that I see have bank accounts. Really, I'm questioning why, but those are the things that we need to look into, bring a report back to council, and I'm not sure when that'll be, whether it be me or the new treasurer. It's a suggestion of mine anyway, to what, how to better handle these reserves and how to better report them. So any questions on them?
Put them back to the, there we go. Just if there's questions.
There are a lot of them. So plus there's also surplus accounts, like some of the ball diamonds and things like that. So yeah, some things that just need to be some consolidating and some research behind them to find out what they all mean and what the intent is of them.
Okay, Terry, thank you very much.
Okay.
Debt info is next.
Okay, so I created the schedule first and had just showing the debt that we currently have. So we currently have the pumping station, and then the water tower and the streetlights are on the same application, which is a bit tough because now you always have to be separating out stuff. And my suggestion even going forward with the fire hall and the Henry Street Bridge, 2 separate applications, 2 separate schedules. It's 2 separate projects, 2 separate departments, and so on. So those would be my suggestions going forward. But because there was some issues with interest and principal payments before with the water tower and the streetlights. So anyway, just for the pumping station, and it ends in 2025, as you can see. Now these are rates. The pumping station, the water tower, and the streetlights do not affect the levy. They're all within the rates. And the interest and principal and interest payments are coming out of the relevant reserve. So not affecting rates at all. I'm showing in here the fire hall and the Henry Street Bridge, and what at this one's 2.7, I guess, percent. See what the payments will be. What the payments and the interest and the principal would be. This is an approximate. I'd have to go when the time comes where we decide we can now go to Infrastructure Ontario, complete the application, and then they will give us a rate offer when the time comes that they accept our application and say we can go for a loan. So the rate, we would probably know approximately what the rate is, but it could vary, it could change. So what I'm showing on those is the principal and interest. And then I also just like to show at the end the total interest you're paying on the life of the loan. Just that's a pretty interesting point too. I mean, when you're thinking that's a long time, over 20 years, but there's a lot of interest on that. But the interest rates are very good right now, somewhat, and so maybe it's time to consider debt so that you can free up some of your finances for future projects or for your asset management infrastructure gap, and put it into reserves and so on. You could be looking at it that way. Any questions? Yeah, 2.7 is the rate. Yeah, the latest rate is 2.7. Sorry, it was lower and then it changed again.
Okay, move on to capital projects. Terry, you're doing.
So this is just a list, and you've seen it all in all of the relevant budgets again. And it's a list of all the capital projects by department, and the sources of revenue, and then the final levy impact on each one of them. And so we have transportation. So Mike's gone through all of his, and the fleet and the bridges. Then we go on to the street lights. Now that will change. We'll change that up to 35,000, and that's great. But it'll also come out of reserves, so there's no levy impact on that. As you see, the water services now, Mike is budgeting to have $500 as trade-in on that pickup. So we put the 500 in each of the water and the wastewater on the vehicle that he's getting rid of. Parks and Recreation, Ketterson Park is in there once again. We do have a little more firm number on the ISIP grant, so that's good. And we're trying to, we're working to really try, when we do tenders and when we get quotes and things, to let you know the amount net of the HST rebate, because it has a 1.76% impact on the non-rebatable portion of, and so it has an impact on the final expense. The library's in there, but of course coming out of reserves. Town hall construction, the building department, that large scanner is coming out of their reserve, the fire department, and then the digital sign for the policing. So the total capital for all programs is $8,622,306, with $1,176,716 for water wastewater, and $7,445,590 for the general. So any questions on that?
Questions on that roundup of capital projects? Seeing none. Maps.
Yeah. No. So yeah, Mike can probably answer this, but we just thought it'd be kind of neat to have a visual of where things are taking place in the municipality. And maybe as you move along and you can start getting into 5 and 10 year capital planning, that is, they can be shown also on a map too.
So looking at those two maps, does anybody have any questions for Mike or Terry? I guess it just kind of shows what we're upgrading this year.
This is also going to help us whenever we start looking at like capitalizing them for the staff that aren't out on the road, because it also has, they're all numbered and so on, which correspond to the TCAs. So we can work together and understand better how to capitalize it.
Questions about the maps? That break must really spurt us. So we've gone through the entire budget. What would you like to do? Pass a budget?
Can
we have to work on, I'm sure.
Can I make a
sure?
If that's okay. If the only real change we documented here was Councillor Vink's request to use up the building reserve in the fire department, and then Jeff spoke to it that we could come back with a report on that or whatever. I could also tell you what the levy impact would be by doing that right now.
So we're quite, and I'll just say that, you know, perhaps what council would want to do, and I think we arrive at this each time, is some direction from council. We've talked about a number of areas where we could make some adjustments and we could do some more research and look into them. And if council had a bit of a suggestion about a target that they wanted us to see if we could bring back, we could bring that back.
Could you do the target again, Terry? It's been long 3 hours. What was our on the page number 1?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, all the way back at page 1.
Yeah. No. Yes. So right now you're sitting at 2.56.
2.56.
Right. With it, and that would be a 1.5% increase on the tax rate, an overall 1.61% increase for the West Perth County and School Board combined rate.
Any questions on that? Do we want to, I see that $17 a household. Jeff Marshall?
Just curious if we have an idea of what inflation is expected to be for 2021.
Well, the way we calculate our sort of cost of living allowances are calculated on the basis of year over year, and at the year ending September 30th, and then they're applied to the following year.
Okay.
If that's the nature of your question. And our current one, that calculation last year was 0.6%.
Mm-hmm. I think so.
I expect.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I don't want to see us fall too much behind the rate of inflation for what we're billing out here, right? If the rate of inflation expected to be 2% next year, then we're in good shape. We're coming in under the rate of inflation, right? If it's expected to be 0.5%, then not that I necessarily think we have to stick right to it, but I'm just curious if we had an idea of what that was.
And financial model predicting in the 2% range as we come out of COVID. So anticipate, again, we've got a lot of year to get in, but I would anticipate it'll be around 1.8 to 2.
Was there any glaring ups and downs that anybody needs more clarification on? Councillor Vink?
Yes, thank you, Doug. So if I could go back to the general administration and I'll just, because I'm not quite clear yet on safe restart funding. The provincial government committed 236,000 to us in 2020 and another 66,000 to us in 2021. So where do I see 236,000 in the safe restarting funding revenue and 66,000 in 2021?
Okay, you don't see the 200 because
Okay.
it's sitting in our balance sheet
Okay, all right,
as a
great.
deferred revenue.
Okay, then if I may, Doug, I would like to come in a little bit closer to a zero this year at West Perth tax. And so I could come up with a number of it of spots that we could figure it out without cutting services. One as an example, so if we had to make up $220,000 to come in at zero, one as an example would be the repairs to the street lights on the highway at $400,000. Let's take that out of reserves, working reserves as an example, that has $400,000 sitting in it, and we know it's going to be replenished. We don't need to take it out of taxpayer money when we know it's going to be replenished by insurance down the road. So let's say, okay, we don't have to come in at a minus a tax rate this year, but we could come in at zero just by doing half of that value by taking that 400,000, say 200,000 out of taxes, and the other 200,000 out of reserves. And once insurance pays it back, then put it back into reserves again.
Well, I believe what you're saying is just kind of shuffle the deck a bit. That is Mike still on there? Kramer, I see he's still on there.
That's just one example of it.
There's multiple examples how you can shuffle around. If you want to do that, I have no issues with that.
Yeah. We just can't use that restart money to lower our tax rate, correct? It has to be specifically spent and Terry, tell me the word. It has to be specifically and authenticated the province that we used it for those projects.
COVID-related impacts.
And another example would be hydro on the arena. We had a presentation. Hydro for 2021 is budgeted more than 2020. So at $72,000 hydro on the arena, that could be a COVID-related safe restart funding spot. That some of that, okay, we've lost some revenue. Let's put it toward that hydro and utility. So there are a number of spots that we could utilize that and be much closer to a 0% or zero. I'd prefer zero this year because of all of the industries that have been impacted, hospitality and tourism and auto parts and equipment. And let's do our part here and not.
So I think that that's great direction for staff. And I think that if you wish, then what we can do is bring it back at the number we can, and I think Nicholas, you've not sort of told us what your hope is. You've also told us where we might find money to realize your hope. So I think that's more than reasonable. I think as staff, we can take that and that direction and come back to council. I would ask you, are you comfortable with us putting a report together with this feedback in the budget we put before you and bring it back to council on April the 6th?
So if they could find, what is it, Terry, is it $85,000 is 1% roughly?
86.6, yeah,
220,000.
So you're looking for about $200 to $220,000 if it comes in at 0.1. Can staff take direction for that?
I think that's a very.
I can see Jeff, everybody sees his head bobbing. So
yes, and I think that's good.
Could we show that before, because we don't want to have a long council meeting on the 6th where we go through everything and say could we have that before and say we took money from here, did this and brought it down?
I would anticipate we'd bring you a report that would explain where we obtained it
and
confirm that everything that all the work that we've done tonight, confirm that we didn't find any, and if there were no surprises between now and then, we would bring that to you with the report. You'll notice that the budget that Terry's put before you has a bunch of the preliminaries in it that you normally wouldn't see until the second meeting. So you've kind of seen these rates already. And so with that direction, I think we can bring a brief report back to you for consideration.
So would we be looking for just staff direction?
I think
Or-
direction and where you'd like to land it is suitable. I guess some advice from the clerk, perhaps.
The clerk? Oh, Jeff?
Yeah, Mike.
Or Mike, sorry.
Can we get a consensus with the rest of council, and then we could probably do it tonight?
Well,
Yeah.
it's 10 after 10, Mike. Okay, let's, so
No,
Carl,
I just, Nicholas had a great idea. If council's with that, we could do it out of the traffic signals. I don't need to put in 300,000 for my equipment back into my equipment reserve that we stole last year. We could we could take some money out of that budget. It's just, the sooner the better.
And then you could make the projects that you have planned happen sooner if we do it tonight, Mike.
Correct. Thank you, Nicholas.
25,000, so if we take 200 from the streetlight project and 25,000 from, what did you say, Mike? The equipment reserve? Where'd you go?
He took off there. But if we get a 5 or 10 minute recess, staff could come back with the changes and show you the changes, and if we could do it tonight.
I can show you in a minute.
Yes, please.
Well, I'm looking up this group. You just want to wait 2 minutes or 5 minutes and have it done?
Certainly.
Most people are shaking their head. They got their hands up. Okay. Do you want a 5-minute recess?
5 minutes.
Or do we want to stay on the line?
Oh, Dean.
Dean?
Chair, through you, going back to the fire report that the fire chief presented, he indicated there was, I'll call it a structural deficit in the fire department funding for future capital equipment considerations, and going back to the mayor's comment about raising the money ourselves rather than borrowing. So I understand Councillor Vink's position, and I understand Mr. Kramer's urgency, but perhaps we could give some consideration when reworking these numbers here during the recess to make provision for the fire service to bring their number up a little bit from what was indicated on the report. I think the chief had 75,000 and he was indicating 100 or something. I'd have to go back to the report to find it.
10, Dean, to keep them on par. So,
yeah, that's the compromise I'm offering here, that if we're going to shuffle the deck, let's shuffle a couple more cards here and make sure that detail's looked after.
And Terry, you would have no idea what we might be able to put into reserves from 2020 yet, right?
Not which do you mean, from the safe start?
No, I'm any.
Oh, from the surplus? Oh, from what the surplus would be? We're not done 2020. There's still things to do, and I wouldn't feel confident to give you a number.
Don't speculate. I was just thinking if there was a couple $100,000 maybe that was left over, but it has to generally go into the same pot that it came out of. So
it would probably just go into reserve. Like we'd let council know fairly what it is, and it can just go into a reserve. It would go into, like, if you had a tax stabilization reserve, and then next year, if you needed to draw money out of that, which you do have a tax stabilization reserve, those kind of the reserves are used to kind of flatten up and stop the up and down of a tax rate.
Murray, Councilor Rose? Turn your mic on.
Yes, trying. This sounds good, as long this isn't going to come back and bite us in later years, and all of a sudden then we have to go up 3 or 4% to make up for this. Everybody feels confident that we can do this, keep it at minimal, that the tax increase, that it won't come back to haunt us at a later date.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. If we need taxes at a later date, we can collect taxes at a later date. But if we don't need taxes today, then let's not collect them just for
This
the sake
sounds a
of
little
collecting them.
similar
Murray.
to the conversation you and I had last year. As long as everybody out there knows, if we come back and say we need a 5% increase, they're not gonna burn us at the stake, so to speak. Just as long as everybody knows, we all like to keep it down, but as our mayor said last year, we shouldn't raid the cupboards. As long as everybody feels comfortable doing that, then we're okay. I just want to put that out there.
I think $27 million in reserves is probably enough for now, Murray.
Then we shouldn't be borrowing any money for the next 20 years then, if that's the case.
And so much has to be kept in according to law, does it not?
Yeah, I mean, the other side.
Yes, don't go no, yes.
Management, the asset management component.
Want to have flexibility. You need that. You need to have money in reserves for flexibility and sustainability. You need to be able to meet undue hardship that happens sometimes. There's so many things that asset breakdown. There's so many things that you need to have. You need to have money in reserves for that.
And that would be a great point to have, is just our reserves. We always talk about, hey, I'm the worst one for talking about it. The water wastewater reserve is probably the biggest one, and it's not taxpayer funded. It's our water wastewater. And our earth reserve was from the sale of an asset, but it's an ongoing one. So there's probably 30 or 35% of our real, but it's up to
half.
And if we want to wait a few minutes, if we want to say, if we can get it to 1%, if 1% is just to go to the levy, if 1% of it just goes into reserve for the fire hall, but not the hall, but sorry, for the trucks, because that's $2 million, I think, over the next 10 years. I'd have to get the book back out again.
Chief Hunter's looking for an extra 44,467 over and above the 70,000 that's currently the annual allocation.
So that's 0.5% he was looking for.
More or less, yes.
Mr. Hunter's on there.
Can I suggest a brief
Sure,
recess?
Sure.
Can I suggest a brief recess and we'll come back? And Terry, I think, is maybe there. I think you heard a lot of good feedback from council, and we've got some proposals that we can just briefly summarize, and then council can decide. I will mention as a premise that I think, we all realize this has been an extraordinary year and we're not out of it. We've just survived a pandemic, or we're well into surviving a pandemic, and it's an extraordinary thing to do a zero, but this may be the right year.
So are we going to go offline, or do you want me to remind everybody to shut their mics off and their?
Just because we can't go into closed session for this. What I'm going to recommend is that everyone just turns their camera off and mutes themselves, and we don't pause the recording. We just take a 5-minute recess. If everyone's comfortable with that.
It'll
just be staff that are, it'll be the treasurer that's going to be working on the side there.
Okay, so we'll just mute and shut your camera off.
Please and thank you. And it's 10:16, so maybe when Terry turns her camera back on in approximately 5 minutes, everyone can follow suit. Thank you. Just for clarity purposes, we are waiting until Terry, the interim treasurer, is ready. And once she turns her screen on, then we will all follow suit.
I'm ready. Thank you for your help.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you, Terry. We were waiting for you for half an hour.
Switch chairs.
Hi, Murray.
Okay. I want to thank Mike too. Mike was helping out too, and Jeff came down, and it was great. So
Do this, right? No.
if I can share my screen, I'm going to show you my working paper, and well, maybe I'll show you the West Perth tax rate scenario that you've seen earlier, and I've got the new number in there. Okay, so if I can share it, I'm good to go. Thank you. And it's this one. So does everybody see that draft 2021 West Perth tax rates again?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so do you see where now it says taxes to be raised, 8,626,805? Right beside it is zero. The levy increase is zero, and we'll go through. So the tax rate increase is a minus 1.03. And where we did that to get the levy to be zero, I'm going to go through what we've done.
You're going to show that screen?
Maybe I'll share this other screen so you can see it. I'll stop sharing this one, and I'll share my other working paper. So now you see, it says departments 21 budget includes grants and so on, 2021 expense budget. You see all that?
Yeah.
So the parts that are highlighted are where we made some changes. So under the fire department, we added $44,467 to be transferred to reserve for the fire equipment. Under the roads, we brought in $100,000 from the roads reserve towards the traffic lights. For the equipment fleet, we reduced the $300,000 transfer by $86,000 for equipment. Under the West Perth Arena, we reduced the $200,000 transfer to reserve by $79,000. So what that does, your previous year for operations minus 3.28%, with the proceeds coming in less the long-term debt principal payment, it's zero at $8,626,805, and it's out by like $400 only because that I could make it right round to the 400 and the 461, but it's because a couple of hundred doesn't change the percent. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes.
Are you good with that? It's still zero, no matter what. It's still a zero.
85,000 for 1%, $85 isn't going to do much on the decimal point.
Yeah, right. So if you're okay with that, that reduces our rate by a 1.03. Now, if I can stop sharing this screen, yeah. And I'm going to go into my working paper for the council overview. I gotta do something else first. Just a second. I gotta go back to this one. I'm not sure that you'll see this. When I switched it, can you see that change? Or do I have to maybe reshare? I'm gonna reshare. I don't think it worked. I had to put it back on this screen. So now I've got to go in here. Consolidated assessment tax rate.
Now, Terry.
Yeah, I'm almost there. I got to get the new tax rate, which is 575.28. Oh, no, it's the wrong one. That's the wrong one. Sorry. 560.94. Yep, 560.94. And we're going to put that here. So there you go. So It's a decrease of $5.83 for West Perth taxpayers on $100,000. And it's an increase overall of $1.36 for West Perth County and school boards at 0.14%.
Questions for Terry? Everybody remember, I can only see, Mackenzie?
So, Terry, can you break that down, household, well, I think you just did household and farm. Where I'm coming from, I'm really not in favor of lowering the taxes on a residence. Like, I think if you leave it, it can be zero, it can be the same as last year, but you don't want to go less than what it was last year.
Okay, I'll get back that same screen again so it shows you what the implications are for each class. Sorry, I've got to share again, right?
Yeah.
So I got to get.
Yeah.
Thanks for being so patient. I'm just not the fastest with this and make sure I get it right. There. Okay. So on a residential, 4,919,000, and on farm, 2,828,499.
Well, I think Walter's question is, is a house gonna pay less taxes than last year?
Yeah.
That's the dollar figure.
That was what it indicated.
On that other screen, yes, they will be paying for West Perth portion only $5.83.
Yeah.
Yes, and overall it was $1. I'll go back on that screen. I want to keep sharing it with you, but
No, that's fine. I guess that my point is that it shouldn't be less than what it was last year.
Dean Trentowski has a question.
Well, to Mr. Chair, through you, to help out with the mayor's suggestion, I would recommend putting that, was it $70,000, Terry, that was taken out of the arena capital allocation?
it was 79,000.
I would recommend putting that back in. Our cousins to the north at North Perth had the same situation, an old aging arena that needed to be replaced, and they did not put sufficient reserves away for the new facility. Fortunately, they got a new facility, but they got a lot of community support from donors, and frankly, West Perth does not have the donor base that North Perth did to pull it off to get a new facility. So I would strongly suggest we put that money back in. All due respect to Councillor Vink, we cannot shortchange that arena. It is 40 years old, and we have to start saving money now. The days of the zero tax increase are over. I realize it's COVID, realize there's difficulty, but we can't burden the future taxpayers with another big bill in the next 10 or 20 years because we didn't start saving a little bit now.
Mr. Chair, it's Anna Marie.
Yep, Anna Marie, Mayor, Ms. Madison. No, Anna Marie Murray. I should know her name.
I concur with Dean. I agree. I think we should put that back in for the arena.
I also agree.
I can tell you what that is. It would be a 0.92% increase.
I can go with that.
So an overall would be a 0.92.
0.92 on the levy. So now let me, if you just take a second, I've just got to go to my spreadsheet where I calculate that. I got to take the 70, so add 79 back in.
I'll take a low blow at Deputy Mayor Ait and Mayor Mackenzie. If they could have came in at the county at something other than 3%, then it would have been easier at our lower tier.
I can take a blow at
He's fighting
Councilor
back.
Bank as well. If we'd have had some reserves at the county, we probably could have done that.
That is a good one, yes.
Touche, touche.
If you want to save some, you want to get rid of some reserve opportunity sitting south of this building here. When you build it,
Minus 0.12%. So see right here. So 560.
taxpayers, or it's not on the levy, It's out of reserves.
So I got that again. So we added 79,000 back, and I can share this screen again, probably, which would be the, I'm not sure what you're seeing, just for a moment.
You gotta start share screen first.
Oh, do I? Okay. Go here, share screen. And it is this one. Sure. So in here, we added back, it subtracted the 225.33, we added back 79,000. It's 0.92% increase on the levy. The tax rate increase is a minus 0.12%. Then we need to go into another screen so I can show you. 566.
Yeah, 566.81.
0.08. I thought it was 0.08.
Oh, is it not this one?
Yeah, 566.
Oh, sorry, it's 0.08.
Yeah, 566.08.
Go into.
We're almost there. Okay, I will share this screen with you now. Are you seeing the screen?
Yeah, 69-cent decrease.
Oh, you got it. Good. I didn't realize that it would just do it, I guess, in the same file. Thank you. So 69 cents is the less impact on West Perth. Overall increase $6.50 on the taxpayer on $100,000.
And that's putting the money back into the arena that 3 or 4 councillors and the mayor asked for.
Right, the $79,000. So it's back at 200,000.
Can we show everybody's face on the screen so that we can see nods or?
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing here.
I'm sorry, that's.
So we got the 467.
So I see here looking for direction for our staff or a motion to accept the budget as presented. Mr. Tam. I guess can't do that guy.
Yeah. So moved. I'll second.
Oh, Mike, you moved it? Okay, sorry.
Moved
by Mike Tam.
I'll second.
Seconded by Councillor Trentowski.
Yes.
Accept the budget as presented. I'll get you at point. The numbers, we have the numbers.
Yes, so it's a 0.92% levy increase. And it's a minus 0.12% decrease in West Perth rate.
Councillor Marshall.
This is just a curious. I know our previous treasurer had talked about about bringing in some money from the money invested. And I don't think I saw it in the budget. I'm just curious what happened to that money.
Money invested. So you mean in the investment income line?
Yes.
So there was budgeted money in the invested income line. Now the money that got transferred to your tax stabilization reserve in the amount of $295,400 in December, I believe.
It was in 2020.
It was in 2020.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? So we have a motion by Councillor Tam, seconded by Councillor Trentowski to pass the budget as presented tonight. I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Could we have a recorded vote, please?
May we have a recorded vote? Just we'll have to hold on here a second. We are recording the whole function, but Carla?
Yeah, actually, if you wish, Carla, I can do.
I'm just grabbing my sheets because I do have in random order. Just to clarify, when we say pass the budget, we do have to come back. So the direction would really to be bring back the bylaw to the next regular council meeting, which would be April 6th. I just want to make that clear that this is just going to be reaffirmed and the bylaw brought back for April 6th. That's what we're voting on.
Councillor Tam, do you accept that? Councillor Trentowski?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Question, Nicholas?
Well, could we also add, if it's okay with the movers and seconders, that we authorize staff to be able to spend funds approved in tonight's budget before the bylaw, so get started on some of the stuff, for example, that operation manager what was discussing.
Yes, that's implied.
Okay, so
Time is of the essence, that's implied, yeah.
then Councillor Tam,
Yes, I'm good with that.
seconded by Councillor Trentowski.
Yes, time is of the essence.
Okay, so Carla, you've got that written up? Perfect.
Yes. So
Okay.
the current resolution is that West Perth Council directs staff to bring back the bylaw for the proposed budget of 0.92 levy increase and minus 1.2 decrease in West Perth rate.
Minus 0.12. Sorry, I'll get you those exact. We'll get you those exact.
We'll get the exact wording if everyone's okay. And that staff be directed to proceed with spending on projects noted within the proposed budget. And that's moved by Councillor Tam, seconded by Councillor Trentowski. My apologies, and I'll take the recorded vote as requested by Councillor Trentowski. So I have Deputy Mayor Ait.
First, yes.
Councillor Matheson.
Yay.
Councillor Murray.
Yes.
Councillor Harold.
Yes.
Councillor Vink.
Yes.
Councillor Marshall.
Yes.
Councillor Rose.
Yes.
Councillor Trentowski.
Yes.
Councillor Tam.
Yes.
Councillor Bell.
Yes.
And Mayor McKenzie.
Yes.
Okay, and that's carried.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's, I have to bring I have to bring Chief Hunter back up here. Because I think, he has to speak to some requests in his reports now.
Just needing some council direction on the report on the second tanker. There was never a resolution from council.
Tab 2, Dean,
I would move to proceed with that recommendation forthwith.
seconded by Council Marshall. Is it a motion? Staff direction.
Correct. Motion.
Motion?
I think it's
Motion?
in the report. I'm trying to find it.
Just trying to find it, but he believes it's a motion in there. Motion by Councillor Trentowski, seconded by Councillor Marshall.
And that West Perth Council recommends the fire chief investigate the purchase of a second tanker that meets the department's needs and timelines. Specifically, the 1,800 gallon single axle tanker that is currently being built by Rosenbauer. We want to have that, and maybe perhaps Chief Hunter wants to suggest a different resolution, knowing what we've spoken about tonight.
Yes, just as I said earlier, that report was written about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago almost. So I'm not sure whether that actual truck is available, but I could certainly be able to report back for April 6th if some council wishes.
Gene?
Yeah, that's fine. If we could amend the motion to say what kind of tanker was it, Chief?
It's a 1,800 gallon single axle tanker.
But the brand name, the Rosen?
Oh, Rosenbauer.
Yeah, just say amend the resolution or the motion to say Rosenbauer or equal. That way we can
Councillor Marshall?
cover that.
Walter, did you have a?
Yeah, I just have a question. And Dean has kind of corrected it. I don't know. I guess I feel a little uncomfortable single sourcing. Normally you would get a tender on a truck and it may not matter. This is where our last truck came from, but if the truck is not available, then that opens it up for either one like that or equivalent. So that kind of covers it. But we do have to be fairly careful when we're purchasing equipment like that.
Anybody else? We allowed to do that under procurement, single source?
No. No, I wasn't suggesting a single source, Your Worship. I was just suggesting we proceed with moving the investigation along further. That's why I suggested or equal. That way we can.
I like that.
Yep, it didn't say that one, it said one or one like it, okay? Are we good with that? Our motion, all in favor? Your hands up, it's carried. You do have trouble up here. Seeing everybody's hands.
It's hard, isn't it?
Where's my agenda? So the budget's done. Is there anything else?
Turn it back over to the mayor.
I'll give up my position as budget chair and turn it over to the mayor so we can turn it over to the mayor.
You're still the budget chair.
Budget chair.
Anyways, there is no further business, I don't think. So I'm assuming, do we need a confirmatory bylaw, Carla?
No.
No? No? Okay, good. So then all we do is we need a motion to adjourn. So moved by Councillor Tam, seconded by Councillor Rose. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, everybody's in favor of adjourning. Good. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Oh, Labit's at
Then
11:51, 10:51.
10:51.
Sorry, Mayor, Mr. Mayor.
You can terminate the live stream. We'll just ask everyone to hold till we're terminated.
Usually you do hold when you're terminated. You're not gonna go anywhere.
We're just terminating the live stream.